She is a beauty, Anakin thinks. Sleek with swept-back wings, she is as fine as any spacecraft he'd ever seen. It looks peaceful and normal. Despite the beautiful cutting-edge design of the royal starship's interior, no one can appreciate its Alderaanian glory without a power supply. The lanterns brighten the surroundings, but most of the ship remains dark. The floor to the lower deck is open to allow Anakin to work on the supply of the power drive. Although it's not something he's doing for money, his craftsmanship isn't any less sharper than his works at Watto's shop.
It's a good thing the hyperdrive didn't give out between star systems. Otherwise, you could have been stranded.
Nelith studies a deep cut in Anakin's left arm. She prepares to clean the injury with a clean piece of cloth.
Sit still, Anakin.
Damage in the power supply isn't bad as the others. I can do a makeshift. Ouch!
Something pricked his arm. Nelith wipes a patch of blood from Anakin's arm, then applies some antiseptic.
There, good as new.
Did you just draw my blood?
Checking your blood for infection. Go on.
Anakin's eyes fix on her. He suspects there is another reason, but he knows that whatever it is, she isn't going to tell him. He turns back to work on the power drive. Nelith comes over to Obi-Wan, who has pulled out a portable testing device from the satchel. Anakin crawls under the floor to approach them from beneath. He can see Nelith scraping a sample of Anakin's blood onto the device's small chip. She inserts the blood-smeared chip into the device. The device begins rumbling. The sound is too low for Anakin to hear clearly at first. He focuses his ears to listen to what they are saying.
Transmitting a blood sample. It'll take some minutes to complete a midichlorian test on it.
Master, are you sure about it?
I saw him pushing a 500-pound Trendos hand across the yard with the Force. He has a potential.
Not the boy. I'm talking about the bed.
Though he has the same amount of skepticism toward Anakin.
His master won't accept Republic credits.
Have you tried mind tricks?
He is a Toydarian.
Oh? To be fair, Toydarians don't let distractions drag along with him, unlike us.
His master is too eager to involve herself when it is not necessary. She is too quick to adopt causes that are not her own. It has cost her time and time again with the Jedi Council. One day it would be her undoing.
This is not a distraction.
It's not our mission either.
It is part of our mission now.
Obi-Wan sighs, feeling like he has become the youngling. He wishes he had her patience. Quietly, Anakin crawls back to where he came from.
What about the cloaked man?
Nelith glances at Padme, who is working on the other compartments of the ship.
The suffocating force I felt from that man who hired them. It was the unbreathable presence of the dark side I have never touched before in my life.
Anakin's head raises to the floor level. His voice draws attention.
The Hutt clan is definitely on the dark side. They are proof that no matter how bad it is to be a slave, it could be worse. Jabba could be your master.
A side of the Force is not as simple as what's good and what's bad.
What differentiates them?
The light side seeks to keep the natural state of the Force as it is. In a way, you could say the light side is synonymous with the Force itself. It works in tandem with it in harmony.
You learned well, Obi-Wan.
And the dark side?
The dark side seeks to dictate the Force and corrupt it for personal gain.
Don't the Jedi use the Force like a tool as well?
Only when necessary to do so. To protect the balance by preventing the dark side from becoming dominant. That is the Jedi's way.
Anakin pops out of the deck.
Then who follows the dark side?
Obi-Wan reluctant to explain as it is a taboo subject, but Nelith answers his question instead.
Primarily the Sith. Once mortal enemies of the Jedi.
Who are the Sith?
Obi-Wan looks over to Nelith. Nelith tells grudgingly, beginning a tale.
A long time ago, so long ago that words cannot describe the time, one rogue Jedi had a different belief about the Force. The belief that the nature of the Force lay not in the light, but in the dark. Failing to gain approval for his beliefs in an order of harmonious followers, he had broken with the order, departing with his knowledge and his skills, swearing that he could bring down those who had dismissed him. He founded the way of the Sith driven by emotions such as fear, anger, and hate. They were obsessed with amassing power by twisting the Force no matter the cost. He was alone at first, but others from the Jedi Order who believed as he did soon came over. The Sith began to build their cult in opposition to the Jedi. Theirs was not an order created to serve, theirs was an order created to dominate.
So what happened then?
A flashback of the ancient Jedi and Sith engaging in a massive sword battle on the plains. With desperate courage, they each cut down a number of beings, humans and non-humans alike. Each fighter panting, arms flailing, proto-sabers clashing and slashing, plummeting to the ground.
Their long wars with the Jedi and the Republic were vengeful and ultimately doomed. Sith disciples began to conspire against each other almost from the beginning, so that the wars they started was as much with each other as with the Jedi.
An ancient civil war had pitted those Jedi who used the Force selflessly against those who allowed themselves to be ruled by their ambitions, which the Jedi warned led to the dark side of the Force. Defeated in that long-ago war, the Darksiders fled beyond the galactic frontier, where they built a civilization of their own, the Sith Empire. The first great conflict between the Republic and the Sith Empire occurred when two hyperspace explorers stumbled on the Sith worlds, giving the Sith Lord Naga Sadow and his dark side warriors a direct invasion route into the Republic's central worlds. This war resulted in the first destruction of the Sith Empire, but it was hardly the last. For the next 4,000 years, skirmishes between the Republic and Sith grew into wars, with the scales always tilting toward one or the other, and peace never lasting. The galaxy was a place of almost constant strife, Sith armies against Republic armies, Force-using Sith Lords against Jedi Masters and Jedi Knights, and the dreaded nomadic mercenaries called Mandalorians bringing muscle and firepower wherever they stood to gain. Then, 1,000 years ago, the Jedi defeated the Sith at the Battle of Ruzan, decimating the so-called Brotherhood of Darkness that was the heart of the Sith Empire, and most of its power.
In the end, the Sith destroyed themselves. They destroyed their leader first, then each other. What few survived the last bloodbath were quickly dispatched by watchful Jedi.
In a matter of only weeks, all of them died. All but one. Now and then someone would report seeing a Sith Lord, but none of the rumors had ever been proven.
Until now.
If they are being stalked by a Sith Lord, they are really in danger.
It's too early to confirm. He could well be a dark Jedi.
Hearing Obi-Wan's words, the implication sinks into Nelitha's mind. What do the Separatists have to do with the Dark Warrior? That is the part she still doesn't understand.
Anakin, keep working on the power supply.
It's done.
Padme looks stunned.
Already?
By the time you talked about the war.
Pilot Rick Oli runs into the main hold from the cockpit.
You fixed the power supply?
Yeah. You can come and look at it.
Rick checks the power drive. When he pushes the switch, the ship shakes for a second, and the interior lights are back on. TH drive functions activate.
I don't believe it! Not even the best of my mechanics could have fixed this.
I'd fire your mechanics.
While they cheer out of focus, Obi-Wan's midichlorian test device beeps. Obi-Wan reads the result.
Master, there must be something wrong with the device.
What do the readings say?
The reading's off the chart. Over 20,000.
Nelitha's eyes widen. She takes a slow, deep breath and exhales. She presses the button on the device.
Here's a recheck. Strange. The system's working fine.
What? What does it mean?
I'm not sure.
Perhaps the sample's been contaminated?
You saw me drawing blood fresh.
They stare at the device, staggered by the immensity of the discovery. Their gazes wander back toward the boy.
That's it, then. It's his destiny.
She says it as if coming to a conclusion that had eluded her until now, as if discovering a truth that, while painful, is obvious. Anakin guesses she was surprised that he'd done that on the Trandoshan because she gives him a strange look again. As if she thought she saw something, but wasn't sure. It wouldn't be the last time she'd look at him that way, but it would be a while until he knew what it meant. This was why the Force had brought them to Anakin. With a midichlorian measurement like that, he needs training, no matter how old he is. But the boy is a slave. How can they get him safely off Tatooine? They can't just buy him, they don't even have enough money to buy hyperdrive parts. Pilot Oli moves to Padme, with his head bowing.
Sir.
Anakin's eyes narrow upon looking at the way the pilot treats Padme. He is sneaking glances at her at every opportunity.
I suppose the lights are working well, but the power supply isn't the reason why we are stuck here. We need to buy parts.
Nelith turns to Obi-Wan.
I will go with the boy, visit his master to join the pod racing.
The bounty hunter saw the boy's face. We would be exposing ourselves in the open to the assassins.
That's exactly the point. No one would dare to kill the players in front of Jabba the Hutt, especially in the midst of the largest pod race in the galaxy. As long as Anakin is in the game, they can't touch any of us.
Trusting our fate to a boy we hardly know.
The ship stirs as a gust of wind ripples against the ship. The sounds become constant. The abruptness and ferocity of it surprise them.
There's a sandstorm coming.
Sandstorms are frequent on Tatooine, and they arrive fast and don't give much warning. Already, sand and dust have begun to blow down. The ramp opens. Anakin, Padme, and Nelith with long scarves and goggles walk out of the broken ship, staring across the desert. Dust flies into her eyes just before Padme takes the goggles, making them sting. The wind whips at their cloaks, but Nelith hardly feels it. The Force shakes with the same elusive wrongness that had been disturbing her since the start of the mission, closer now, but no easier to sense. They need to get off this planet soon.
We gotta be fast. Standing outside more than an hour without protective gears will tear your skin to the bone.
I can already feel that.
As they walk down the ramp, Anakin looks at Padme. She notices he is staring at her, and he cannot help himself. He cannot take his eyes off the girl. He takes a deep breath.
Your name is Padme, right?
Yeah.
I find your presence intriguing.
There is a moment of silence, and she begins laughing, a sweet musical sound he doesn't mind at all. When people refer to her as such, she is usually dressed as queen, and she can't take a compliment seriously if she's a queen. Everyone flatters you. Everyone wants something. Only a fool would listen.
Maybe I just like the peace and quiet.
Or maybe you are the reason why the Jedi are here.
Padme is flabbergasted. The amused smile returns. She reaches up to touch her hair self-consciously, but she does not divert her gaze.
You are an odd one. How do you know so much?
His stare is unnerving, more like a man's than a boy's.
If you aren't a Jedi or a crew, why would you be coming with us? Or is it the other way around? You even sounded like you're above the Jedi.
Nelith is observing him. He's bright. Something lurks in the Padme's eyes that Anakin doesn't understand. There's also a slight happiness. The wind rises on. Obi-Wan Kenobi stands at the entrance of the ship as the wind gathers force, whipping at his robe, tearing across the broad expanse of the Tatooine desert, a sign of the sandstorm that would blows hard through the deserts. The Jedi might not realize how fast storms come up, or how bad they can be. Obi-Wan shouts at them to make his voice loud and clear.
The bounty hunters are still looking for us.
I know the safe way into the town.
He turns to Nelith.
You've talked to Watto before, so you know he's a grumpy old guy. Don't expect a warm welcome.
That wouldn't be a problem. This hasn't been our day for warm welcomes anyway.
Master,
She turns to him.
may the force be with you.
Nelith nods. Even as he says, the force of the wind picks up, driving the sand against their clothes. With the wind howling all about them and the air clouded with sand, Anakin shouts at Padme.
I'll guide you. Come with me. Hurry.
They seem to attract bad luck, Anakin ponders. They head off. The wind starts blowing into the ship. Obi-Wan's troubled eyes look off into the distance where Mos Espa is beginning to disappear behind a curtain of sand. Obi-Wan turns away from the stinging gusts of sand before closing the ramp. Footnote. While I have been critical of the movie explaining too many things, there are moments in this movie where the movie does a poor job of educating the audience about the significant information in the plot. For example, the first and only explanation about the Sith we get in the movie happens at the 1 hour and 24-minute mark, and the answer they give is that Sith is the attacker and they have been extinct for a long time.
My only conclusion can be that it was a Sith Lord.
Impossible. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
That is it. What the hell is the Sith? Considering the Sith has not been mentioned in the original trilogy, not even once, it only leaves the audience confused. Imagine if A New Hope not had the scene of Obi-Wan explaining what the Force and the Jedi are. For the backstory of the Sith, Redone borrows Qui-Gon's monologue from the Phantom Menace novelization by Terry Brooks. This is a little touch. Qui-Gon extracted a blood sample from Anakin by using a chance when Anakin sustained an injury in his arm, yet how Anakin sustained this cut is not in the movie. He got the cut somehow beforehand, I guess. Redone adds a moment when Anakin gets wounded during the chase to give context to this moment. Standing as if carved from stone, Nayberry clicks on a broadcast and stands watching a broken Sio Bibble's plea to come home, to save his people from starvation, to help them in their time of need.
Cut off all food supplies. Death toll catastrophic. Your Majesty, please tell us what to do. If you can hear us, you must return.
The hologram is grainy and unclear, but Bibble's kind face cuts to her heart. He is bruised and scarred. Separatist trick or not, the suffering of Alderaan is written on every feature as he pleads for them to return. The holocom then turns to focus on another round of 30 cuffed Alderaanians, begging and crying out for their lives. Like taking livestock to slaughter, the droids march out and push them against the wall. The battle droids round them up. They are normal citizens randomly dragged off from the camps.
Ready, weapon.
Please come back to Aldera. I don't want to die.
Your life is important, but my life is also important.
Fire.
The blasters go off. It turns her stomach how one being can do this to another, but she quickly understands how. As he said, the droids have no remorse.
Subject terminated.
They carry out the command without any joy, disgust, or empathy. Droids have no regard for life or compassion. They don't regard their victims as people.
There's another one.
A crying boy crawls out of the bodies, covered in blood. He is trembling and terrified and only survives because his mother shielded him.
Blast him.
OOM-9 sets the barrel against the child's head and pulls the trigger, like a factory bolt gun killing a calf.
Human life cease.
Nayberry watches it all the way through, her head bent. She wishes she didn't see it, but as the queen, it is important to know their atrocities for posterity. One line after another, it is endless. She will have to find a way to bear that pain. In the cave, the crackling message begins to repeat itself.
Nayberry?
Nayberry turns the transmission off, and the transmission flickers and disappears. The screams fade into silence. Handmaiden Nayberry sits staring at the empty space it left behind, her smooth face troubled. Her hands work quietly in her lap, betraying a nervousness she cannot quite manage to hide. She turns her gaze to Handmaiden Dorm, who has spotted her listening to the broadcast.
Prince Organa has forbade you from listening.
Am I a handmaiden or Queen of Alderaan?
Nayberry manages to get to her feet, her hand instinctively moving down to her wounded leg.
Am I Nayberry or Breha?
Dorm hesitates, her voice breaking.
You are our queen.
Then I have my duty, and that duty demands that I soon return to the city.
Dorm hesitates, her voice breaking.
You should stay here, where it is safe.
My father has always said, the safest ship in the universe is the one at anchor, but a ship that doesn't go out to sea is no longer a ship. There is nothing more I can do if I run. My place is with my people.
You wish to surrender?
My fate will be no different from that of Alderaan. I shall not deny that fate nor die in anonymity.
She is afraid that the mission would be a failure, that the Separatists would capture Padme, that she'd never live to see her family and friends, that Alderaan would be demolished. But fear is a useless emotion. She needs to fight, and the only way she knows how to burn through her fear is to summon her anger.
Your Majesty.
I am speaking as your queen, and I am issuing you an order. Take me to Aldera.
Dorm's shoulders slump in defeat, and her gaze softens as her eyes turn toward the ground. She argues her queen's reasoning, arguing against all of this insanity.
But they will kill you.
Breha smiles, attempting at a small attempt at levity.
I will be fine.
Then she embraces her handmaiden in a great and tight hug, squeezing all the tighter when she hears Dorm start to weep.
I will be back in no time.
Breha fights back her own tears. Both know it is a lie. In a blinding, choking whirlwind that tears at clothes and exposes skin with relentless force, the sandstorm rages through the streets of Mos Espa. The place is a jumbled collection of hovels stacked one on top of the other so that they resembled anthills, each complex linked by common walls and switchback stairways, the plaza fronting them almost empty as the sandstorm chased everyone under cover. The market is closed. Shopkeepers are taking down their awnings and putting up shutters before fighting to reach their homes while there is still time. Other residents and visitors struggle past, engaged in a similar pursuit, heads lowered, faces covered, bodies bent over as if weighted by age. Somewhere in the distance, an Eopie bawls in fright. The light turns an odd yellowish gray, obscured by sand and grit, and the buildings of the city disappear in a deep, impenetrable haze. The few people walking outside are the bounty hunters, wearing heavy sandproof armor to endure the storms. They are still looking for the Jedi even in this condition. Grains of sand beat against the armor, a rapid pocking sound. They eventually retreat from their positions. Seizing this chance, Anakin, Padme, and Nelith run and crouch. Padme has drawn her hood around her and covered her mouth. She is choking on dust and sand. She closes her eyes to near slits. She had never felt such driving wind before. The storm blots out the two suns and turns the air into a stinging force. She can't see the street behind them or what is ahead. Everything is a blur. She follows Anakin a short distance down the street to a slave wagon, a ramshackle affair formed by a makeshift ragged awning stretched over a framework of bent poles. They hide behind the wagon, avoiding the eyes of the bounty hunters. She didn't know how fierce the sandstorms could be on Tatooine, but now she does. Thankfully, Anakin had a way into Mos Espa that avoided both the storm and the hunters. They open a manhole on the ground and jump in. Anakin and his two guests are crawling, using the flashlight to see where to go. The grains of sand stuck to their sweating bodies are almost unbearable. Padme is slow, tired as she has not slept since the crash, but Anakin is still energetic.
Gracious, my bones are aching.
We are almost there.
Even as Anakin fights his way through the winds, Anakin's thoughts are directed elsewhere. He is thinking of Padme and Nelith, of having the chance to take his home to give a tour, of being able to show them his projects. It sends a flush through him that is both warm and scary. It makes him feel good about himself. It is almost too much to hope for, that a real Jedi might be going to his home, to visit him. But Anakin's instincts tell him he is not mistaken, and that something mysterious and exciting has brought this little group to him. Padme rubs her eyes. She blinks and then looks again.
Don't you feel tired?
Being forced to work for Watto does that to you.
Is there anyone else to help your work?
I have a friend. Well, hardly a friend when it's a droid I made.
You made a droid?
All manner of strange and frightening voyagers pass through Tatooine. This includes some pretty weird old droids. That unit was ancient. It was covered with rusty armor plating and even had a fuse box. Anakin is eager to explain it.
It's an astro droid. I found him gutted and discarded in garbage dumps, so I rebuilt him with extra scraps. Primitive but with some adjustments, he behaves like any other living being.
As they crawl, they encounter a hole in the wall, hastily dug up. The passage leads to a smaller ground tunnel.
Here's a tunnel I made a few years ago. My master's still not found out about it, and I'd like it to stay that way.
That's okay. We are very good at keeping secrets.
They crawl into the passageway.
If you made this tunnel, why not just run?
Anakin becomes solemn. He points to his collar.
All slaves wear transmitters around their necks. I've been working on a way to deactivate it, but no luck. Any attempt to escape this planet or break the collar, they blow you up!
Even before ending his sentence, Anakin squeezes all his strength to push the floor upward. If Anakin can't leave Tatooine, she has no idea how to free Anakin, though she has spent a considerable amount of time thinking about it. She believes an opportunity will arise. The three come out of the open floor and clean the dirt off their clothing. As a slave, he is not permitted to travel without permission. This is an assigned dwelling. What does the home of a slave look like? She doesn't know what to expect. Nelith has seen smaller quarters than the hovels of Coruscant, but she has never seen anything like this. The shelters are too little and stacked tightly. It resembles a solitary cell rather than a livable bedroom.
This is one small bedroom.
Welcome to reality. To be caught up to speed, would you like a seat by a slave? We have been ringing the alarm for centuries.
Padme ducks her head, confused and embarrassed. Her life hasn't always been full of riches, but now she knows that she'd never even glimpsed the kind of hard effort that Anakin faces, just to get through one day. The lasting impression is care. Anakin had taken a shed and poured time and love into it. It looks clean and scrubbed. There isn't any furniture, but it looks sturdy and well kept.
I can't believe there is still slavery in the galaxy. The Republic's anti-slavery laws should.
The Republic doesn't exist out here. We're forced to survive on our own. There is no future here. Not for me, not for you, not for anybody.
She has placed all her faith in the Republic. Its laws are formalized and enforced throughout the galaxies. Yet there are places, whole worlds, where they are ignored. Is she placing too much faith in the Senate? Padme turns to Jedi Master Nelith.
Why is the Senate still allowing these slavers to operate anyway? Do they even know what's even happening here?
I'm afraid that, despite the Chancellor's best efforts, there are still many bureaucrats, judges, and even senators on the payrolls of the slaver guilds.
The guilds of slavers.
She echoes with anger and distaste. All in the galaxy know well the depravity and perverseness of slavery.
The Separatist Alliance has vowed to keep the living properties legal, while the Republic Senate only lip services to abolish them in fear of powerful interests. They always argue it's all for the economy.
Let vermin fester, grind trillions to die for money? The worse the poor gets, the better the rich gets, like some iron law of nature.
Anakin feels the emotions swirling around him, hurt, frustration, anger. He isn't even looking at her, he is just staring off into the distance.
Then I say, take their kids and kill them. Not cold, starving slaves. Make their economy with their kids.
It moves Padme's emotions. Nelith can understand him. There is no one to side with the likes of him. No one has the resources to enforce the law or cares enough.
In truth, it's not the matter of lacking money. It's that there are too many thieves in power.
So slavery continues because everyone lets it happen.
I can live with poverty. I can't stand injustice.
As Anakin hides the tunnel by placing back the floor piece, Nelith peeks through the door gap.
All right. Let's move.
She opens the door. Outside, the wind howls past the doors and windows, enough to shave a fresh layer of skin from the exterior of the walls.
We need to run. Get ready.
They cover their faces with the scarves and put the goggles on their eyes, then look outside. Everything is a hazy wall of orange.
I can't see a thing in this goggle.
Take my hand.
Anakin takes Padme's hand in a frenzy of ill-concealed excitement.
3, 2, 1. Here we go.
Anakin slams the door open and leads his charges through the storm. Anakin holds her hand with a firm grip, leading her through the howling storm towards safety. And as he does, she has the strange sensation that she has met one thread of her force. He is thinking, finally, of his dreams and his hopes for himself, thinking that maybe something wonderful would come out of this unexpected encounter, something that would change his life forever. The wind howls past, a river of sand and grit. Anakin, Nelith, and Padme run. He leads them to a small open area surrounded by piles of worn-looking equipment and irregular, sand-colored shops. Padme finds two slaves trudging through the sandstorm, a mother and her child. They wear the same slave necklaces Anakin wears. She picks her child off of her as the child crawls her away into the sand. Too weak, they can barely walk on their own. The child is dying in her arms. The mother cradles his boy as they collapse in the storm. Anakin, Nelith, and Padme rush toward Watto's large but dingy repair shop, a mud and sand hut front and enclosure packed with rocket and engine parts salvaged from scrapped and junked wrecks. The two race past a stack of spaceship parts towering in front of the shop and duck through the gritty gloom to the front door and push their way inside. A bell automatically rings. Padme finds her throat so dry that for a moment she cannot speak.
Water! Water!
Anakin takes the bottle he carries and splashes the fresh water on her face. Padme drinks, devours water as if she has been stranded in a desert, then spits the sand out of her mouth. She coughs several times and breathes at last. She leans on the counter.
I don't like sand.
She coughs off and spit out.
It's coarse and rough and irritating. Gets everywhere.
She then gives it to Nelith, who is wiping off sand from her robes.
I guess it comes from living on a desert planet more than a minute.
How do you even live in this world?
By getting used to it.
R2-D2 greets them and happy beeps.
Hey!
Anakin pats his droid.
Have you been missing me?
Anakin is anxious to show Padme his project.
This is my droid, R2-D2. Want to see up close?
The droid jerks several times in response. It wasn't empty bragging. Anakin has talents beyond his years. Padme bends over his shoulder, studying the droid carefully. He is anxious for her reaction.
He's cute.
She had met plenty of technicians, but she had never known anyone who put a droid together for fun. Watto enters from a work area off to one side.
You must be crazy. How did you come here? The shop is closed.
His sharp, bulbous eyes flick from one face to the other, ending with Anakin.
You! I was looking for you all this time.
Watto flies like a crazed probe, tiny wings buzzing fast like a bee. He takes the cane and flies into Anakin's face to beat him. Nelith grabs Watto's cane in a flash. Her grip is firm.
Don't do that again. He is the one who brought us here.
Watto advances on her another few centimeters, then stops once more. Nelith holds herself erect in the same way that Anakin does. Watto regards her sourly for a moment more. Watto tries to pull his cane out. When she lets go of the cane slips off from his hand and then drops to the floor. His arms cross defiantly over the rounded torso as the Toydarian regards Anakin with disdain.
For a moment, I suspected you'd run away from me.
Oh, and give you the pleasure of seeing my necklace detonate?
Pleasure? You think I like cleaning up exploded slaves? Bue, eh.
When he is done laughing, he turns to a frowning Nelith.
Why are you still here? Get out if you ain't buying.
I have a proposal to make.
Nelith puts her hand on Anakin's shoulder.
We would like to sponsor him in the race tomorrow.
It takes a few moments for Watto to comprehend, but when he does, he breaks into raucous laughter. Watto's trunk-like nose wrinkles in evident amazement that anyone would take a risk for a slave like Anakin.
This boy.
She has made a decision based on desperate need, but also on how she feels about Anakin. He is decent and capable.
Why not? He did race before.
Because the last time I let him race, he smashed up my pod.
Nelith glances at a sullen Anakin.
It wasn't my fault, really. It's because Sebulba cheated. I actually saved the pod racer, mostly.
That you did. He's good, no doubt there.
So you must have the pod still.
It will take too long to fix that piece of junk tracks for the race.
Hey, the damage wasn't that bad.
Okay. You can't afford parts. How can you do this? Not on Republic credits.
I layer ship for the entry fee.
Doubt mirrors clearly in Padme's brown eyes.
Excuse me?
Nelith does not seem to notice her puzzlement. She reaches and brings out a tiny holoprojector. Clicking on the power source, she projects a hologram of the Nubian royal starship into the air in front of Watto. That's when Anakin knows how serious their problems really are. Watto flits closer, studying it. There is a hint of curiosity that gleams in his stilted eyes.
Not bad, not bad.
It's in good order, except for the parts we need.
She flicks off the holoprojector and tucks it back into her pocket.
I'm sure Anakin doesn't like putting himself in danger.
No, I don't like it. I love it. I can help you.
We will find another way.
Nelith looks over at the girl and shakes her head slowly.
I sense this is the way. Maybe Anakin was meant to help you.
It is a strange thing to say. For a moment, Nelith and Padme lock eyes. Something passes between them, as though she is giving him to her. How odd.
Is that a yes?
Anakin claps his hands in glee.
That is a yes!
The junk dealer has cunning, but Nelith is counting on his greed.
So, you supply the entry fee, I supply the boy and the pod. We split the winnings 40-60, I think.
40-60. If it's going to be 40-60, I suggest you front the cash for the entry. If we lose, you keep my ship.
Padme's blood boils.
If you win...
If we win, you keep all the winnings, but I get the ship's parts, and the boy gets his freedom.
Anakin's eyes go wide. He feels himself melting in confusion and wonder. Anakin turns away from Watto and looks at Nelith, wondering if he'd heard right.
What?
It means you'll no longer be a slave.
Anakin stares at her in disbelief, his worn face rigid, his eyes mirroring his shock. Anakin watches Nelith appreciatively. He suspects he really is dreaming. Watto seems confused by this. He works his mouth and trunk-like nose in a rooting manner, but no words would come out. So Watto snaps, bursting into a new round of laughter. He turns to Anakin.
Yobana piota, media, deal. Your ship is mine soon.
He keeps laughing as he leaves the room. Still slightly stunned by this unexpected news, Anakin stares at Nelith. For a moment, she and Anakin lock eyes. She gazes back with a smile. Something passes between them. Padme wrinkles her smooth brow. She doesn't know what the Jedi Master is thinking.
Your ship? Since when was that ship your ship?
We're stranded on Tatooine, not Alderaan.
The Queen would not approve.
Nelith meets her gaze squarely.
The Queen is not here.
Padme's eyes blaze.
Well, I don't approve.
Footnote. In the film, Anakin only learns his freedom was part of Qui-Gon's bet after winning the race.
He has been freed.
What?
You're no longer a slave.
You mean I get to come with you in your starship?
In Redone, Anakin knows his emancipation depends on this bet before the race. This may be a small change, but recontextualizes Anakin's actions. If Anakin knows his fate is on the stakes, then there is greater joy in the victory.
Base in range. You may fire when ready. If there's no threat to the rebels, then there's no joy in the victory. Essentially, they just went and killed a bunch of people. Which they did, but now it's a fight for their own survival.
It makes the race more dramatic and determined. One of the criticisms leveled against the Phantom Menace is that it is just a gigantic ripoff of A New Hope. While I disagree with this and believe the Phantom Menace did a good job rhyming the original trilogy without straight-up copying it, I must admit the inclusion of C-3PO was the only part that felt overtly fanservice in the Phantom Menace. By now, you may notice Redone does not feature C-3PO. The story does not need him. Not only does 9-year-old Anakin being the creator of C-3PO stretch the suspension of disbelief, but you can also cut C-3PO out of the Phantom Menace, and makes no difference to the plot. C-3PO should have been introduced at the end of Episode 3 as an Alderaanian droid first time. However, R2-D2 is a smaller and less sophisticated droid. The addition of detail that Anakin rebuilt R2-D2 from the abandoned droid instead of making it from scratch also helps this inclusion of the classic Star Wars character digestible. In addition, R2-D2, whose role mainly fixing things, would actually be helpful for Anakin as he works in Watto's workshop, and R2-D2 does something in the plot such as saving the Nubian ship and nestling into the starfighter during the climax. This fixes the problem of why Anakin built a protocol droid like C-3PO to help his mother when protocol droids would be useless to her. User Popularis Socialis pitched an idea to change the bomb in Anakin to a collar around his neck that cannot be removed without it exploding. This serves the same purpose, but it gives a more visual reminder of his class inferiority. In the lower level of the Mos Espa sewer system, on the steel bridge where Maul met the bounty hunters, the hologram of Darth Sidious stands on Maul's wrist controller that is linked to the ship's subspace radio. The noises of the sandstorms from above almost drown Sidious' voice, but Darth Maul knows better than to be distracted by them. Maul has been keeping his reports brief and accurate, the way Darth Sidious likes them.
Those incompetents have performed worse than our lowest expectations.
It's time. Reveal yourself to the Jedi, and then everything should be going as planned.
His expression is hidden by his hooded cloak, but his satisfaction is evident in his tone of voice. He tells himself to control his anxious desire. If his master senses it, he will rebuke him. He has been punished for his impatience in the past. He doesn't blame Lord Sidious for the punishments, they only made him stronger. Yet he does not want to invite them.
As you wish, my master. It's too late for them to stop us now.
It amuses him to predict the Jedi's surprise at the deadly skill of the Sith. They will know that they have returned, and they must suspect they are no match for the Sith. Fear will curdle inside them. Fear is an unfamiliar feeling to a Jedi. Now they must live with it. The hologram disappears, leaving Darth Maul with a thrill of anticipation. Maul is content there. He still has much to learn. Not in battle, but in larger strategies. Sidious sees weakness and exploits it. He senses anger and inflames it. His vision takes in a galaxy, with its multitude of planets and governments. The complexity doesn't intimidate him. He can hold it in his mind and know that someday, he will control it all. Maul turns when he hears footsteps from behind. The bounty hunters approach him from the tunnel, 10 beings from the species of Togorian, Trandoshan, Rodian, Human, Bith, and Twi'lek, all holding blasters, blades, and vibroaxe.
We were not able to find the Jedi. We believe they have left Mos Espa.
Irritation courses through Maul at this interruption.
You don't get the rest of the payment then.
The bounty hunters are taken aback.
What did you say?
You go outside. Let the sandstorms change your mind.
Do you even know how many lives we lost last night?
Maul's yellow eyes glimmer with anger in the strange mosaic of his face. He feels his living force ebb, and the dark side surges in him, pulsing, filling him. He had underestimated the greed of the bounty hunters.
I care not for the lives worth no more than a fly.
Maul does not see beings as others do. Under normal circumstances, he barely registers other living creatures, unless they are threats or obstacles. When he goes into battle they cease to be living beings at all. They become targets. One of the bounty hunters laughs. He licks his lips with a thick purple tongue.
Did you be heard, Lord?
He wants nee go.
Then he says in basic.
Your pegats. Hand them over.
This is a waste of my talent.
Maul sighs. He is not impressed. Why do his opponents announce their intentions with threats and taunts? Do they really think they can intimidate a Sith? Maul never speaks in a battle. It is a waste of energy. He prefers to concentrate on the joy of killing. The leader of the bounty hunter pulls out a vibroblade on him and walks toward Maul.
Deal is the deal. Pay now or...
Maul draws his lightsaber from beneath his robe. One swoosh and Maul neatly severs bounty hunter number 1's hand from his wrist. The bounty hunter boss vibroblade in the chopped hand clatters to the floor and then falls into the sewer water. Bounty hunter number 1's eyes widen in surprise as he gazes down at the empty place where his hand once was. Then he feels the pain. The blinding light from Maul's ignited crimson lightsaber reveals the panicked, unprepared faces of the bounty hunters. The targets freeze for an instant. The red beam pierces through the bounty hunter boss' stomach and comes out from the back. Maul pushes the body toward the rest of the bounty hunters, who fire on Maul, but the body of the bounty hunter boss takes the shots as a meat shield. The dull-witted cretins don't use strategy, they just rush at him like barbarians. When Maul gets close to them, he throws the body away and in a series of flashes Maul slaughters the nearby foes, using the narrow, limited space to his advantage. The lightsaber is a blur of light and motion. Maul's lightsaber is no longer a separate weapon, but part of his arm. He moves in the time it would take his opponent to blink. He moves in the time the opponent would take to raise his weapon. The enemy would only see the space where he had been. The enemy would feel the sudden shock of the blow that would knock him to the floor. At the crest of his arc, his lightsaber is high in the air. Maul twists slightly to attack the second bounty hunter from his right side. When the lightsaber comes down on his shoulder, it has all the force of Maul's body behind the blow. The hunter goes down with a surprised grunt, his arm and blaster clattering to the floor. He delivers another blow, piercing his chest, and he is still. He moves aside as the third bounty hunter wields his vibroaxe. He is fluid as water and slips through his opening like a breeze. He grunts in frustration at his inability to touch Maul. This hunter is bigger than the second, taller than Maul is. His fur gives off a rank, sour smell. Maul dismembers and disarms him. His last howl is ear-splitting. One bounty hunter staggers and roars at him in rage. Then he charges, all aggression without finesse, honking an odd battle cry. Maul is expecting this, of course. He waits for his momentum to make him clumsy as he begins his strike an instant too soon. It is easy for Maul to evade the blow. When the hunter totters, Maul whips around, his lightsaber twirling, and his lightsaber slices the neck. He slices another as the bounty hunter crashes to his knees, then falls over, dead. Not only Maul is fast, but he is calm and collected, Every move deliberate. None of the wild, desperate flailing of his adversaries. One of them tries to hit Maul with a mace, but the lightsaber slices the primitive weapon into two and decapitates the criminal. The dark side alerts Maul that one target is taking aim at his back. He will try to crush Maul with a swipe from each hand, hoping to cut him in two. Maul leaps, again using the dark side to add velocity and distance. He sails high above his head and grabs onto the railing with one hand. He uses the momentum to swing past the target. Maul lets go, makes a midair reversal, and lands behind him. Maul has done this so fast that the target's two vibroaxes are now meeting where Maul's body once was. They tangle, emitting a screeching sound that sends smoke spiraling upward. The hunter roars in frustration. Maul's jump lands him behind him and slightly to the left. It is his favorite angle of attack, though of course he is invincible from any position. The hunter spins around to face Maul, already swinging his vibroaxes. They meet the handle of his lightsaber. Smoke rises, and Maul feels strength shudder up his arm into Maul's shoulder. He likes a good adversary. But Maul doesn't have time to play with this one. He flips backward and reverses direction, coming at the enemy from the right. Maul slashes his arm, rendering it useless. It dangles by his side, and the vibroaxe falls to the floor with a thud. Maul's blow has angered him. His eyes are filled with pain. Maul notes this with glee and attack, his lightsaber a blur of red. He dodges one blow, catches the next, and cries out. He moves in for the kill. Maul's blood pounds in his ears, and mingles with the blood he has spilled. His lightsaber hums with his killing blow, a vertical sweep through the chest. In seconds, the hunter is on the floor, dead eyes glazed with surprise. One climbs up the railing and dives into the water. Maul throws the lightsaber a boomerang, which returns to Maul's hand after severing his body. Maul moves without thought and kills without mercy, and he does it faster than those lumbering bounty hunters can take a breath. In a minute, the 10 bounty hunters are heaps of flesh and parts on the bridge or have fallen into the sewer water dead. Their expressions are frozen at the moment of their deaths. Maul sees surprise, horror, pain, rage. The targets have been eliminated, and he's not even breathing hard. But the 2 bounty hunters remain alive. One is their leader, who coughs and chokes on his blood. He doesn't get a chance to take a breath. He won't make it. The other will. This Bith, who spied on Watto's shop, is crouched in fear. Maul approaches them, his lightsaber glowing. Instead of coming at him, the Bith wheels around and runs. He's heading for the tunnel to escape.
Run, and you die. Stay, and you live.
The Bith turns, frozen, watching Maul. The bounty hunter leader waves a vibroblade, but it merely fans the air. Maul kicks it off his remaining hand. Maul awaits for him to beg so that the kill tastes better. The bounty hunter leader struggles, but barely voices his words.
What the hell are you? A Jedi.
Maul holds his head. There is no expression in his mosaic face.
I'm Jedi's calamity.
And the red beam of the lightsaber goes down his throat. He had no time to regret an attack on a Sith. After ramming their greed down their throats, he gets up and steps out of the bridge to the tunnel floor, toward the sole survivor. The Bith tries to run again, but Maul reaches out, and it sends the hunter flying. He hits the wall with a dull thud. Maul charges toward him and grabs his neck. Holding him above the floor, with his blade pointed at his face, over his mouth, Maul instructs him.
Tell the townspeople what you saw. Tell everyone that Sith have returned.
The Bith nods. Maul lets him go. The only survivor races into the tunnel without a cry, so he can expose the Sith's return. Maul then turns to face the bridge, on which the smoking bodies are scattered. Maul throws his saber, which flies spinning across the sewer and slicing the narrow steel bridge on the other side, and curves back to return toward Maul's hand to cut the bridge on his side. The bridge then collapses into the sewer water alongside the bodies. Maul deactivates the lightsaber and the darkness returns to the room, but his yellow eyes still gleam, looking at the torn bounty hunters flowing through the sewage into the dark. He lifts his arm to view the control panel strapped to his forearm, picks out the settings he wishes to engage, and punches in the calculations. We see 3 football-sized probe droids float out of Scimitar in the cave and head off in 3 different directions toward the city of Mos Espa until they vanish in the darkness. The probes have been downloaded with information on the Jedi. They will send back readings that will give Maul the coordinates of the Jedi's location. Footnote. Although Darth Maul is one of the bright spots of the Phantom Menace, there is barely any personality to his character. He got only 3 lines in the entire film. He did not have his own agency or did nothing unless Sidious instructed him to. Before you may argue Boba Fett was just like that, the difference was he wasn't the main villain. Vader was. Luke didn't have a climactic fight scene with Boba Fett on Cloud City. Redone gives more dialogues and moments to reveal his character traits like his interactions with bounty hunters. He is impatient, cruel, distasteful of those he considers to be low-life, and arrogant, which will set up his behaviors in the climax later down the story. It adds danger to him before his confrontation with the Jedi. In his garage, Anakin has been working on the rusty podracer Watto gave with R2-D2 to prep it for the race. Padme saves him some time finding the parts he needs. He asked for her help fixing the podracer. The engine is unlike any that she knew, but she could hold tools and pass them. They have worked all afternoon. Her hands are grimy, her right hand holding a tool. All Anakin has to do is tightening the wiring on the thruster relays to the left engine, then adding some armor. For all its power and speed, the podracer is an amazingly delicate machine. One nasty scrape against a rock formation or another racer, and it could disappear in a flaming bath of rocket fuel.
Have you been here long?
Since I was very little, 3, I think. I was sold to Gardulla the Hutt, but she lost betting on the pod races to Watto. Watto's a lot better master, I think.
Anakin puts the last piece to the engine and steps back to Padme. His thoughts drift. He can't explain it exactly, but he knows that tomorrow will change his life. That strange ability to see what others do not, that sometimes gives him insights into what would happen, tells him so. His future is coming up on him in a rush, he senses. It is closing fast, giving him no time to consider, ascending with the certainty of a sunrise. What would it bring him? The question teases at the edges of his consciousness, refusing to show itself. Change, but in what form? Nelith and her companions are the bringers of that change, but he does not think even the Jedi Knight knows for certain what the end result will be. Maybe the freedom he had dreamed about for himself. Maybe an escape to a new life for him. Anything is possible if he wins the Bunta. Anything at all.
Isn't it great?
Padme is at a loss for words. It is clear the sheer scale and complexity of the podracer have taken her breath.
It's wonderful.
Padme goes to touch the engine.
Please touch gently until...
It snaps. Pieces of the engine collapse and break apart from it, tumbling to the ground.
Sorry.
Anakin grinds his teeth.
That's okay. If that broke it, it would have collapsed in the race.
As Anakin goes to pick up the fallen components, he hears sniffling. He sees Padme is tearing up.
Hey, I said it's okay.
There is an awkward silence as Padme looks away, not knowing what else to say. It's nothing to do with the podracer.
Farmers who cultivate water, sandstorms, and boys and girls who are slaves. This is all so different from Alderaan.
So you're from Alderaan?
Padme covers her mouth. The silence stretches. She doesn't seem to know what to say next. Anakin taps her shoulder to ease her.
Don't feel sorry for me. I don't like anyone feeling sorry for me. And from what I heard, Alderaan might turn into a place not so different from Tatooine.
His last sentence makes her imagine what could to Alderaan if the Separatist occupation continues. Her people could be transported as indentured servants under the regime. It gets Padme worked up.
How do you know about Alderaan? About us?
I keep my ears open to all the traders and pilots who come through here. Someday I'm going to fly away from home like you.
I didn't flee.
Maybe you didn't, but you were hiding.
Padme's gaze darts away. He is right. How awful that she has to run away, maybe fight one day. That's why she is on fire to get to Coruscant. She wants to stand up and say, this is wrong. Say it so clearly and strongly that the rest of the galaxy would rise up and cry it with her. Alderaan will be free again. Unwilling to chance another mistake, she stops talking. Darkness cloaks Mos Espa in deepening layers as night descends. It should be a quiet, soft night that welcomes in its peace, yet the storm continues throughout the remainder of the night, engulfing Mos Espa, sand blown in from the desert piling up against the shuttered buildings, forming ramps against doorways and walls, clouding the air, and shutting out the light. After she ate her simple supper, Nelith has moved off alone into one corner and surreptitiously contacted Obi-Wan on the comlink. The connection is less than perfect, but they are able to communicate sufficiently.
Every second past the pod race will put us in danger, and Alderaan remains in chains. If the Separatists' demands are not met within days, they will plummet Alderaan into ashes. Besides, this is a perfect chance to prove Anakin.
Obi-Wan sighs and strokes his face.
Master, the boy might possess of more living force than normal, but the Council would never accept him for Jedi training. 15 is far too old. And his slave background.
Age and background don't matter.
Nelith is silent for a moment, thinking. In the back of her mind, she senses she is meant to do something for this boy, that it is necessary she try. But most Jedi are identified within the first 10 years of birth and given over to their training. It was true for her, for Obi-Wan, for everyone she knows or has heard about.
All that matters is that the boy is special.
They will not believe it. In all honesty, I'm not sure I believe it either.
Nelith looks out the window. Anakin had been right about the storm. It rages all that afternoon and evening. She wishes she had his perseverance. No doubt the Sith will eventually find them. There is no time.
Let go your conscious self and act on instinct.
Master Yoda said instinct is useful only if born of the Force and not of impulse.
Nelith's expressions change, filling with frustration and disappointment at the turn of events.
Impulse. Our meeting was not a coincidence, my young apprentice. Nothing happens by accident.
The Council might make an exception for someone so talented. She is more and more certain that the Force had drawn her to Anakin.
Anakin will become a Jedi, I promise you.
She has always been a magnet for trouble. Does her confidence come from one of the rare glimpses of the future? Or does Nelith plan to train Anakin whether the Council approves or not? Obi-Wan frowns.
Don't defy the Jedi Code, Master, not again.
I will do what I must.
It's another detour, Master, and your senses aren't that attuned.
Nelith has heard the faint extra emphasis on your senses. Maybe she would let this go on, after all.
And yours are.
The Council will not go along with you this time. Master, you could be sitting on the Council by now, if you would follow the code.
You could be a Jedi Knight by now if you would take chances.
Obi-Wan closes his eyes in dismay. This is a disaster waiting to happen. Nelith has made the decision to bring the kid along and join the race because Anakin is another project that she, with her persistent disregard for the dictates of the Council, has determined has value. He wonders what Master Yoda had been thinking all those years ago, when he brought Nelith and Obi-Wan together as Master and Padawan apprentice. Master Nelith Jin has great skill, no question of that, but sometimes she is so intense. Master Yoda always sees farther than anyone else. Perhaps he had thought that an earnest young apprentice would be as good for Nelith as Nelith would be for the apprentice. It would be like Yoda to balance Nelith's headstrong nature and his by-the-book methods against Obi-Wan's patience and her unconventional ways. He would have to ask Yoda about it, after he passes the trials and becomes a full Jedi Knight. That wouldn't come soon, Obi-Wan thinks, though he hadn't said anything about it to his master yet.
You still have much to learn, my young apprentice.
I must have heard that 1,000 times from you by now.
Obi-Wan puts his hand on his face. She is planning to defy the Council, Obi-Wan thinks with a sinking feeling. It is a preoccupation that both mystifies and frustrates Obi-Wan. Nelith may be a strong and brave master who refuses to be intimidated by even the most daunting challenge. She repeatedly defies the Council in matters that Obi-Wan thinks are barely worthy of championing.
Leave in the moment and do what you feel is right.
I feel it's right to cancel this pod race plan. We can find a smuggler to get to Coruscant.
We can't. I have already bought the tomorrow ticket.
She takes the Bunta Eve Classic ticket out of her pocket.
Uncancelable.
Wait, Master!
Nelith cuts the transmission. The storm still howling without, an eerie backdrop of sound against the silence within. She wonders if she did the right thing. Then she darts off. Nelith cannot sleep. It is this boy. There is something about him. The Force is strong in Anakin, amazingly strong, the boy practically glows with it. For all his talent, Anakin is already much too old to be trained as a Jedi. Jedi teachers normally work with very young children, whose emotions have not yet begun to shape their responses. Yet it is clear to Nelith that encountering Anakin is no accident. Best to move slowly, and let things become clearer. Nelith walks into the Watto's garage. Padme is sleeping in a chair. She is tired from stooping and has fallen asleep with the blueprints scattered on the table. Anakin looks tired as well, nearly half sleeping, but still finishing the work with R2-D2. His thought is still foremost in his cluttered, weary mind when he hears Nelith calling him.
I hope you're about finished.
It's not the greatest pod racer, but it should work just fine.
Nelith studies the pod racer. The pod has activated the anti-grav lifts and floating 2 feet in the air. The pod racer is shaped like a narrow half-cylinder with a rubber skid attached to its flat bottom, a cockpit carved into its curved top, and steering arms attached at its sides. It resembles a chariot, pulled by 2 souped-up sleek Raid-Ulzer fighter engines with scoop air stabilizers tow the pod at the end of Steelton cables. On the other hand, Anakin's pod is tiny, just large enough to hold him and all the controls. His engines, by contrast, are huge, narrow gold machines twice the length of the pod racer, and at least as big around, even with the foils closed.
See this?
Anakin points to the side of the pod, which is fitted with the scrap metal.
Padme and I added some improvised armor to protect the pod from Sebulba's weaponry. Not sure if it will work against his buzzsaw, but it's something.
We can only do the best we can with what we have.
He turns to R2-D2.
I think it's time we found out if this thing can run.
Anakin hits the ignition switch. The turbines roar. Red and pink energy binders flash between the engine casings, and orange flames burst from the afterburners. The first stage of engine fire can be heard. Anakin flashes a big grin at Nelith. Then the turbines begin powering down. Nothing happens, and the engine goes off. Padme almost wakes up, but her eyes won't open. She unconsciously adjusts her posture and sleeps again. Anakin sighs and puts his head in his hands. He wipes sweat and tosses a wrench to the ground.
We'll never race tomorrow.
Anything I can help?
Anakin stares at Nelith.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
I've been wondering, what is midi-chlorian?
Nelith is taken aback.
Did you overhear us?
Of course I did. Back on the ship.
Nelith pauses for a bit.
Midi-chlorian is a measurement of the living force that resides within all living beings.
The force flows in me?
In all living beings. Anyone can cultivate it with enough time. We all are symbionts with the cosmic force.
Symbionts?
Without the living force, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the force. You happen to be more innate than most.
There is a long pause, long enough for Nelith to realize she has talked about the subject he is not prepared to answer. She gives him time and space to deal with the matter, not pressing him, not making it seem as if it is necessary he answer at all.
I've known I'm special. I don't know how to explain it, but I can see things, sense events before they happen.
That's a Jedi trait. It's the Force continually speaking to you.
Anakin shrugs.
I ain't hearing it now. I can't even redo the Force.
He gestures with his hand.
The Force won't come up.
Nelith takes his hand, like a mother he never had.
The Force is not a hand waving. You'll use the Force without knowing it. The Force is something inside you, just a feeling, an instinct, a string of guesses that lead you to things others would not dare imagine.
When do I know to use it?
Time will come when you can feel everything around you as though the whole universe is playing inside your head.
She puts her hand on the pod.
This vehicle will become your body. The pulses of its engines will become the beat of your own heart.
Anakin nods. His own fear has uncoiled and faded away now, all but a hard little core. But that fear had been with him since the day he was old enough to understand what being a slave meant. He is used to it, and used to hide it. Anakin closes his eyes and reaches his hand toward the engines, almost as if feeling inside, as if his mind is diagnosing his pod racer.
Feeling something?
And indeed, he is feeling something. An instinct. A sense. Like a doctor finding a tumor. Anakin takes the wrench he threw a moment ago and crouches. He is trying to loosen something from the engine.
Definitely.
That's what the Force does. It binds everything in the galaxy together.
As Anakin uses the wrench and struggles to solve the problem in the engine, he asks her.
What if the Force consumes me? Like the last time I used it against the Trandoshan? He was scared, and I used it without knowing it.
Nelith gives him an understanding smile, and for a moment Anakin wonders whether she has fears that have to be crushed sometimes.
That is why we are taking you to the Jedi. Jedi are the followers of the Force. We use the Force for defense and knowledge rather than use it to gain power over others.
Finishing the patch-up, Anakin puts the wrench down and jumps into the little capsule behind the two giant engines.
Okay, R2. Let's try again.
He puts the power pack back into the dashboard. Anakin waves at Nelith.
Move back.
Nelith complies. He holds his breath and hits the ignition switch. Flame explodes from the afterburners, and a huge roar rises from the radon ulcers, building steadily in pitch until Anakin eases off on the thrusters, then settles back into a throaty rumble. Padme wakes up at last.
Is it working?
It's working! It's working!
He feels the vibrations from those powerful turbines. Anakin has never felt so happy. Anakin's pod racer does work, well, he'd always known it would, but it is different, actually having the engines ignite for real. He will enter in the Bunta race, and there will be someone other than Watto to cheer him. He would win this time, he knows it. He has to win. For himself. And he has a real Jedi staying with him, even if it is only for a night or two. Watto flies into the cargo upon hearing the engine noise.
Hey, if you don't, get to your shit for tomorrow.
Watto wheels on Nelith, spinning violently, wings whirring, and flies to confront her. But her calm, steady gaze brings him up short, pinning him in the air midway between her and Anakin. Nelith moves toward him.
No. He's a Bunta Eve pod racer for now and you will treat him like one. He needs a better place to sleep.
It's alright. The shed is comfortable for me.
Watto snorts and leaves. Padme looks at Anakin making some adjustments to the controls, with a worried and sympathetic gaze. She speaks to her quietly.
He looks so young, and we are risking everything on him. If Anakin doesn't win, we'll be stuck on Tatooine. What will become of Alderaanians then?
You need to have faith.
Padme isn't ready to forgive her.
I only have faith in the things I can see.
Perhaps that is your mistake.
Footnote. The problem with Kagan wagering for the pod race in the movie is that he went for it before learning Anakin is the chosen one. It would make sense if he risked everything after testing Anakin's midichlorians count, but the deal occurs before the test, with barely any minuscule objection from Obi-Wan, who has never even met Anakin at this point. In Redone, Nelith bets on it after the test, and Obi-Wan's objection to the decision is stronger. It also addresses that there are other choices such as sending a rescue signal to Coruscant or looking for other shops. I am aware the topic of midichlorian has been beaten to death for decades.
Sorry, we need them to use the Force.
Oh, good. You do understand.
So the Force isn't magic?
Oh, no. Is that what you thought all these years?
It's science. Biology.
However, some have argued midichlorian was intentionally a bad concept. All the issues with midichlorian were intentional, as Lucas intended to highlight the failure of the Jedi Order that they judge a life's value in the Force by measuring the number of microscopic magic cells in their blood. It is an institutional commentary on the Jedi Order, just as what many fans hated about the Jedi in the prequels, such as their forbidden marriage, not allowing emotions, corruption, and incompetence. That is why they were clinging on the Chosen One prophecy to their bitter end. The Jedi have become systematized and dogmatic. They have their traditions and their procedures, and midichlorian was one of the devices to make this point, which flew over fans' heads. While I do like this explanation, this isn't true, as evident in Lucas interviews. However, even if this was true, there would have been a far simpler way to deliver this message. Midichlorian should have been a word, term for direct measurement of the living force in a living being, like meter, Celsius, gram, or parsec. This works far better at delivering this message. Even if a microscopic organism explanation might achieve a similar goal, it carries the origin of the Force baggage that was not needed in the story. With this one change, this amps up the old Jedi's problematic viewpoint far overtly. In Prequel Redone, the Force power is not set in stone for individuals, just as how it was in the original trilogy. However, the Jedi Order's bureaucratized recruitment system effectively divides people into two classes, superior Force-sensitive and inferior non-Force-sensitive. It is why the Jedi take special children all around the galaxy rather than open about its recruitment. It is more about a selected few who are naturally gifted rather than achieving your power through hard work, deciding precisely how strong with the Force someone builds in artificial divisions and competition in an organization that is about maintaining peace and justice. It also plays into the feeling of the Jedi being disconnected from the rest of the galaxy. You must have this level of midichlorian to join our club. It makes Grievous' canon backstory of wanting to be a Jedi but was denied because of not being a Force-sensitive more poignant. I think this change would have allowed the sequel trilogy to have a point in refuting this idea and embracing the democratization of the Force even further, acknowledging there is indeed a natural talent, like Rey and Anakin, but baseline talent does not ensure success or failure, and anyone can become a powerful Force user.
That Force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity. Can you feel that?
Morning lays over the planet of Alderaan. Camp 5, the prison camp established by the Separatists on the square, holds dozens of the Alderaanian officials in the Queen's service. The insignia on their uniforms indicate a mix of guards, soldiers, and mechanics. A vast array of battle droids armed with blasters keep the Alderaanian prisoners in the camp. There is not anything the captives can do except find spots to sleep and get what rest they can, knowing that the next day will be just as hard as the one before.
Your Majesty.
Queen Breha Antilles, in the handmaiden's clothing, is thrown into the camp. Through the roaring in her ears, she hears cries of terror and worry. She chokes and blinks to clear the dark afterimage from her eyes, the droid Ekis wheeling in, followed by the B-1 battle droids moving through the door. Their footsteps click like the exoskeletons of insects. They surround the Queen and the prisoners, weapons pointed. Disoriented, Breha Antilles stumbles as she tries to rise, raising her hands. They're herding Alderaanian people into camps, and she can't stop them. The Neimoidians step in, marching past the battle droids, followed by Droid Commander OOM-9. The smug Neimoidians examine the Queen with barely concealed satisfaction.
She isn't as heartless as I presume.
The Queen has just been captured. Now, Alderaan is in the hands of its proper authorities.
The Neimoidians smile, satisfied smiles that remind her of a cat's after it's caught the mouse.
I brought you here for a purpose, Queen Antilles. I am giving you an opportunity to publicly denounce the Republic and their efforts to seize the secession of the Separatist Alliance.
We do not recognize your authority.
And we don't recognize the Republic.
Recognize the Republic or not, you will have to explain this invasion to the Senate.
We will demand. The Separatists will declare independence right here, and hundreds of secessionist star systems will follow.
And the Separatist Alliance is pleased you have chosen to come before us, Your Majesty.
So that is their game. If the Queen committed Alderaan to the Separatists, her world would be bound by her decision. Breha had expected what was to come. She could guess everything that a Separatist would say. Newt Gunray is not clever. He goes by the book. Eventually, he would resort to threats.
You will not be so pleased when you hear what I have to say. We will not forsake all we have honored and worked for. We will not betray the Republic.
Then you will betray your people. Without your cooperation, I can do nothing to stop the occupation.
To his surprise, she does not budge from her position.
And in that statement lies the truth of your proposed improvement.
Newt takes a beat to study her. Newt Gunray tells her in a patronizing tone.
Now, Your Majesty, you are not going to like what we have in store for your people. In time, their suffering will persuade you to see our perspective.
She shoots an angry look at Newt. He stares back, impassive. Rune Heiko roars, swinging around to OOM-9.
Commander, close the gate.
Roger, roger.
At his command, the battle droids push her into the camp and push the door to close it. Breha falls to the floor. She gets up, helped by the prisoners. The pain in her leg is excruciating. She forces herself to relax. This is viewed by Bail Organa and his guards and handmaidens from the ledge of a distant cliff, outside the city. Bail can hardly draw his breath. Wide-eyed with disbelief, the icy fear is closing around his heart. He is thinking about ways to help, to stop the mission from failing, but he can't do anything. Alderaan is lost.
There's nothing we can do. We have failed.
Her loyal handmaiden lays next to her, looking at the camp with the scopes.
Alderaan is not yet lost. She didn't surrender herself without a plan. She told me it's a diversion.
Bail seems too stunned to respond.
Is she crazy? What was she thinking?
She's stalling them for us to make a move.
What move?
She seems frightened to tell her plan.
To contact the Gungans.
That night he has a new dream. Still blurry, but just slightly clearer than the last time. The figures are Jedi, holding lightsabers. One falls and another fighter continues to fight against the one. The dream shimmers. Anakin's eyes pop open wide. He has been sleeping in the cockpit of his pod, parked at the main hangar of the Mos Espa Podracer arena for the race. The hangar is a cavernous building that houses podracers and equipment and serves as a staging area for vehicles and crews on race days. A handful of racers are already in place on the service pads, and dozens of aliens who had found their way to Tatooine from every corner of the galaxy crawling all over the pods and engines as pit bosses and pilots shout instructions. The clash and shriek of metal on metal echo in an ear-splitting din through the hangar's vast chamber. While Anakin's waking moments have become painful, sleeping is even worse. Anakin has a secret. A dark secret. It has to do with the dreams he has. His dreams are different from the dreams of others he knows. It is about the way his dreams always end. It is a secret that frightens him, one he can never tell. Anain's heart is still wild in his chest. He turns to see R2-D2 scuttle around the racer, applying paint in broad strokes to its polished metal body, aided by a light projecting from a receptacle mounted over his visual sensors. R2-D2 likes having his master around, exchanging beeps and chirps as he scuttles about the racer. The little astromech droid works tirelessly, cheerfully, and willingly. Nothing perturbs him. Anakin envies him. Droids are either well put together or they aren't. Unlike humans, they don't respond to weariness or disappointment or fear.
Did you give the pod a check?
Anakin looks around the hangar where a dozen crews are preparing their racers. Good mechanics are hard to find out here. He never saw so many creatures pretending they know what they are doing. One team has mounted their engines backward. Nervous drivers scream in frustration. The tension is understandable. The law of pod racing is unforgiving. Once the race begins, few will finish, and many will die trying. Then Anakin finds Nelith. She is already there, with a scarf covering the lower half of her face for disguise, strolling with Watto through the hangar. Because of the clamor echoing through the hangar, he can't hear what they are talking about. Judging from the crowd in the pod racing hangar, the Bunta race seems to be the only exciting event on Tatooine. Nelith can see natives of nearly every one of the Outer Rim worlds, from Malastair to Tund. Each of them has brought a custom-designed pod racer and a crew of droids and mechanics to work on them. The prize money for this race must be significant, to attract so many. Watto seems to take it for granted. He flies alongside Nelith with blatant disregard for everything but his own conversation.
The sandstorm yesterday got ya.
Nelith pulls the scarf to cover her face more. She coughs and looks around to see if there is any bounty hunter nearby.
As if it poured sand into my lung.
Hey. Good that the weather forecasters got it right today. I wanna see your spaceship the moment the race is over.
Patience. You'll have your winnings before the sun set, and we'll be far away from here.
Not if your ship belongs to me. I warn you, no funny business.
Watto says as they make their way toward the area assigned to Anakin.
You think Anakin will lose?
Sebulba there is gonna win. I'm betting heavily on Sebulba.
He motions to a bright orange racer parked close at hand. The orange racer's engines are modified so that when the energy binders are activated and the engines joined, they form a distinctive X shape. Sitting to one side of the racer is a Doug, Sebulba, his wicked eyes fixed on them, his slender limbs drawn up in a vaguely menacing gesture before the fans who have gathered around him. Nelith frowns and turns to Watto.
Always wins.
Because he is Jabba the Hutt Skywalker. And he flees like his title, walking the sky like he owns it.
Master.
Nelith catches sight of Obi-Wan, running toward her.
Master Nelith.
Upon hearing the word master, Watto looks at her strangely. Nelith realizes his mistake.
He is my slave.
Watto eyes her for a beat, puzzled, then heads off. Nelith hurriedly gestures at Obi-Wan to cover his face. A masked Obi-Wan comes to Nelith with 2 earpiece. Those long-snout pack animals would pull the pod's turbines to the race arena out in the desert. Nelith would dare anything when she finds a challenge that interests her, even if she risks herself in the undertaking. So it is here. Anakin is a risk of the greatest magnitude, and there is no reason to think that embracing such a risk would reap even the smallest reward. He can't believe she did this without consulting him. Obi-Wan tells her in a quiet voice.
I sense a loss of focus with him.
Maybe for the moment, but that may change with time. You must look deeper.
I've looked deep enough, and there is nothing to see. All this is an unneeded distraction.
Your sensitivity to the living force is not your strength.
I wonder what Master Yoda had been thinking all those years ago when he brought you and me together.
Nelith glowers.
I wonder why you are my learner when you keep disrespecting me.
It is not disrespect, Master. It is the truth.
From your point of view, perhaps.
Nelith's face is hard and tight with anger, frustrated with her apprentice's obsession with the Council and the authority.
The Council will decide Anakin's future. That should be enough for you.
She says as if that settles the matter. Obi-Wan meets her gaze.
The boy will not pass the Council's test.
Listen to me, my young Padawan. There are secrets hidden in the Force that are yet to be discovered. The Force is vast and pervasive, and all living things are a part of it. It is not always apparent what their purpose is, however. Sometimes that purpose must be sensed first in order that it may be revealed later.
Obi-Wan's young face clouds. He shakes his head.
Why must you always be the one to do the uncovering? Some secrets are best left concealed, Master. You know how the Council feels about these detours. Perhaps, just once, the uncovering should be left to someone else.
No, Obi-Wan. Secrets must be exposed when found. Detours must be taken when encountered. If you stand at the crossroads, you must never leave it to another to act in your place.
Is it a detour or a dead end?
Like all of the Jedi Knights, Obi-Wan Kenobi had been identified and claimed from his parents early in his life. He no longer remembers anything of them now. The Jedi Knights had become his family. Of those, he is closest to Nelith, who had become his most trusted friend. Nelith understands his attachment and shared it. Obi-Wan is the brother she would never have. He is the future she would leave behind when she dies. His hopes for Obi-Wan are enormous, but he does not always share his students' beliefs. Padme has arrived at the hangar and is heading toward the Jedi. She looks mystique with her face covering.
A ship without a hyperdrive won't get us anywhere. If all goes well, we will have our parts by this afternoon and be on our way.
What if this plan fails, Master? We could be stuck here for a long time without Jabba's protection from the assassins.
Padme gets into the conversation.
Then we can fight. Maybe free the slaves while we stay here.
Obi-Wan shakes his head.
If the Republic can't stop them, we must abide.
Padme punches her open palm, drawing their attention.
It's outrageous.
It galls her to think that the slavers are weaseling out of their well-deserved punishment.
At least we can free one. He deserves better than a slave's life.
If he wins.
Nelith is possessed of her own peculiar vision of a Jedi's purpose, of the nature of her service, and of the causes she should undertake, and she follows that vision with unwavering single-mindedness. Anakin comes over to the Jedi and the girl.
Guys!
Anakin. Today, you carry all our hopes.
No need to put any more pressure on him.
He has enough riding on his actions already, and he knows how important it is. Nelith can sense the tension within him.
I won't let you down. I promise. I have been preparing this for my life.
For your life? You've never won a race?
Well, I almost won if Sebulba hadn't cheated and smashed me into meta drop.
Your pod was smashed. How did you practice then?
I couldn't.
Anakin turns to Nelith.
He didn't know? Aw. I'll win anyway, so.
Of course you will.
She laughs it off awkwardly, in a tone that makes Obi-Wan want to take his lightsaber and clunk her over the head. From the corner of her eye, she sees Obi-Wan glaring at her, half warning, half pleading. Anakin is the one on whom their hopes depend. The boy's enthusiasm is hard to resist, but what is she thinking, to get a boy mixed up in the middle of a mission? Even if he wins the race, what will she do with him once they get to Alderaan or Coruscant? Obi-Wan studies Anakin. He doesn't know about this. He just doesn't know. Meanwhile, Watto approaches Anakin's empty pod. Stopping at the left engine, he reaches up and breaks a small part protruding from it. He glances around to see if anyone has noticed. Footnote. The only remotely compelling characters in The Phantom Menace are Anakin and Padme, but they are not the protagonists. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are, and they both boring, bland, and have no internal struggle. When you pair two characters together for an entire movie, the story needs a conflict between them or else you get a stale character dynamic that will bore the audience to tears. This is the basic buddy cop dynamics that make the pairing of two characters work. There are only two conflicts between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan in this movie. The first is when Qui-Gon bets on the Podracing. Obi-Wan asks,
"What if this plan fails, Master? We could be stuck here a very long time."
Well, it's too dangerous to call for help, and
a ship without a power supply isn't going to get us anywhere. And there's something about this boy.
This could be an interesting basis to spark a heated argument. But it doesn't happen. Those two lines of the comlink conversation are the start and the end of the conflict. That's the scene. That one line of concern is the only time Obi-Wan shows any sort of resistance to Qui-Gon's decision on the pod race. He listens to and follows everything his master tells. There is another moment later in the film like this, which I will talk about later. This is the reason why the scenes starring Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are boring, because there is no drama. Compare this to A New Hope, where everyone hates one another for most of the movie. Luke and Han don't get along.
10,000? I'd almost buy our own ship for that. But who's gonna fly it, kid? You?
You bet I could. I'm not such a bad pilot myself. I don't have to sit here.
Han and Obi-Wan don't get along.
Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything. There's no mystical energy field controls my destiny.
Leia and Han don't get along.
From now on, you do as I tell you, okay?
Look, your worshipfulness, let's get one thing straight. I take orders from just one person, me.
So when are you still alive?
Leia and Chewie don't get along.
Will somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way?
No reward is worth this.
3PO and R2 don't get along.
Go that way. You'll be malfunctioning within a day, you nearsighted scrap pile.
Vader and Tarkin don't get along.
Enough of this. Vader, release him.
As you wish.
This makes the character interactions fun and entertaining. For example, you have Luke trying to save Leia and pitching a plan to rescue her against Han, who's trying to just escape the Death Star.
I'm not going anywhere. They're going to execute her. Look, a few minutes ago he said he didn't want to just wait here to be captured. Now all you want to do is stay? Marching into the detention area is not what I had in mind. But they're going to kill her. Better her than me.
Luke has to use his wits and convince Han by appealing to his character trait, greed.
She's rich. Rich, powerful. Listen, if you were to rescue her, the reward would be... what? Well, more wealth than you can imagine.
You can see other scenes of conflicts like this peppered throughout the movie between Luke, Leia, and Han, so every scene between these characters is entertaining because those conflicts are always on display. The Phantom Menace already had Obi-Wan as someone more aligned with the Jedi Code and Council, and Qui-Gon as a more carefree maverick. Redone makes the conflict between Nelith and Obi-Wan more overt and confrontational. Qui-Gon's decision to free only one slave, Anakin, has garnered many criticisms. Some people point out he had no other choice, though considering how Qui-Gon Jinn's character was supposed to be a maverick Jedi within the Order, who buckles the Council's status quo, it is even weirder for him to turn blind eyes. This is worsened when you read a comic that has Qui-Gon explaining the slaves would be better off as property than as free beings. Honestly, I think this is the area where Lucas didn't much think about the implications when he was writing the script. It would have been nice to have a few lines of exchange or argument that tie the Republic's inability to stop the slave trade and the Republic being corrupt. Redone adds several discussions of this that build up to the overall theme of the trilogy. The storm had subsided, and the wind abated. The twin sons of Tatooine rise. Within an hour, the heat is stifling. A vast arena in the Tatooine desert. A large semicircular amphitheater that holds at least 100,000 people dominates the landscape, jamming into the grandstand seats, crowding onto the broad viewing platforms, filling the available space. Large viewing platforms loom over the racetrack. Owners and vendors are completing sales and glancing in the direction of the traffic's steady flow. The arena becomes a vast sea of color and movement. Cam droids fly around to capture the roaring audience in the arena. The two suns are directly overhead, and the heat is so intense it feels like flame. It is a broiling hot day. The arena is lined with viewing stands where the spectators gather to watch and bet. The turnout is always large because everyone loves to watch pod races. Excitement is rare on Tatooine. On race days the crowded streets of Mos Espa are empty. From a monitoring tower, a two-headed Troig announcer, Fode and Bede, describes the scene. Fode speaks in Galactic Basic and Bede speaks in Huttese.
Tugi. Tummi cha kolka du bunta magi. Taus azalis oval pod races.
That's absolutely right. And a big turnout here from all corners of the Outer Rim territories. I see the contestants are making their way out onto the starting grid.
The signal comes for the pod racers to take their positions. On the left side of the tracks across from the grandstands, a line of pod racers emerges from the large hangar, surrounded by several crew members. Pods are pulled by a wide variety of creatures. Some are towed by Eopes, some by repulsor sled, all part of a long procession of pilots, pit crews, and hanger-on. Anakin, Padme, and Nelith pull out his racer by hand to join the row of pilots, while the rest of the group has their Eopes haul their pod racer out into the arena. Bands play in support of some racers, and isolated horns and drums beat in wild appreciation for all. Both Nelith and Padme are shocked at the huge size of the arena and the tremendous crowd. Every available seat is filled. The heat and the noise are like a physical force, pressing against her chest. Brightly colored canopies shade the more expensive seats, and food vendors have set up stands in several places. The racecourse itself swings into the desert and out of sight. The grandstand is huge and filled to overflowing. There must be 100,000 beings here, Padme thinks. Most of the spectators have purchased small, specialized view screens so they can follow every minute of the pod race. The excitement in the air is catching.
La Waime Beast 2.
I see Ben Quadinaros from the Tun system.
Ben Quadinaros, a male Tung, waves his hands.
Agiscano Duanupa or Petrovia.
Giscano, a male Zexto, waves his forearms.
Two-time winner, Bowles Rower.
Bowles Rower, a male Sneevil, raise his hands.
Pu Tula Musta, Wo Grain Champio Sebulba.
Sebulba gets on his pod and receives the largest crowd reaction. He stands and waves to his fans, drowning in applause. Padme nears Anakin.
That's Sebulba? He's ugly.
I don't care about looks, but I do care about cheating, and he's the worst.
And in the front row, near side pole position, Mahanik.
Mahanik, a grandman, bows to the crowd.
A hearty hello to Clegg Holdfast and his Voltec KT-9 Wasp.
Clegg Holdfast, a Nosorian, bows like a gentleman.
And back again, it's the mighty Dud Bolt with that incredible racing machine, the Vulturine 327.
The crowd cheers.
And hoping for a big win today, Odie Mandrell, with his record-setting pit droid team.
Pit droids fight each other next to Mandrell's pod.
And a late entry, young Anakin, a local human slave.
Boop human BU race.
Anakin, with R2-D2 standing beside him, gets little to no cheer. Anakin waves and then returns to his work.
I see the flags are moving out onto the track.
The flaggers hold various large flags, fluttering in the wind, onto the track. The flags bear the insignia of the racers and their sponsors waved over the assemblage, signifying favorites and creating impromptu cheering sections. Nelith is holding Anakin's flag. Anakin was distracted by the cheering when Sebulba's name was announced. He is considered the best pod racer on Tatooine, and everyone is betting on him to win the Bunta Classic again. And where is Sebulba? Hanging behind him. Sebulba edges his way next to Anakin and gives him a sinister grin.
You still naga Tabidu Skywalker, huh?
Anger shows in Anakin's face, but he crushes it down until it almost doesn't exist, and keeps marching.
I don't want to do this right now, Sebulba.
I warned you. Yuba Wahoo even Banto BC Jish winning, Banda Pudu.
Anakin looks the evil Sebulba in the eye with a cold stare.
Cha Skrendi de Pad, Slimo.
Padme approaches them and give a warning look, and Sebulba backs off.
Shak Kong.
Anakin's eyes squint.
What did he call you?
Slave scum.
Although Anakin is nervous, he also knows he can do it. He'd raced against most of these creatures before. As long as his pod racer stays in one piece and he keeps away from Sebulba, he can beat them all. Nelith comes to Anakin. Her face is warm and reassuring.
Are you all set?
Anakin gets into the pod, preparing his racer.
Are to check the pod this morning. Sebulba will be chewing on my exhaust in a couple of minutes.
Nelith feels the dangerous tension within Anakin change slowly to normal excitement. The Jedi breathes a small sigh of relief. Though she does not doubt the power of the Force could not act through a mind clouded by fear.
Anakin, Remember. Concentrate on the moment. Feel. Don't think. Trust your instincts.
It is as near as she could safely come to telling Anakin to use the force that flows so strongly in him. Without training, more specific advice would only confuse him.
I will.
Nelith gives Anakin a big hug. R2-D2 rolls up to Anakin and beeps with approval and reassurance. Nelith looks him right in the eye before stepping away.
May the force be with you.
And be safe.
And that's when Anakin realizes that as far as Nelith is concerned, this isn't just a race. It is also a test. Of him. Before the race starts, a flurry of movement in the royal box signals the arrival of Jabba the Hutt and Gardola, his female friend. Slithering into the dark interior of the box, the two Hutts ooze their way along the flooring to their designated places amid the bright silks that drape the rough stone. A coterie of humans and aliens come out to the arched overlook where they could be seen by the people of Mos Espa, guests of Mos Espa's rulers on race day, a coveted designation. A line of slave girls of varying species come last, chained together, there for the amusement of those who had chosen freely to attend. One of the Troig's heads announces,
His Honor, our glorious host, Jabba the Hutt has entered the arena.
The racers form a line facing the dark royal box and on command bow deeply in recognition of and to pay homage to their benefactor. Hesse Stantley Anakin bows at last. He shoots a vicious stare. This is ridiculous, Anakin thinks. Jabba the Hutt, the biggest slime in the galaxy, sat in that box, and the racers have to bow as if he is some kind of king. The king of the crooks, maybe. The Hutts never even reveal themselves to the masses directly. They are always under the shadow behind the bulletproof glass. Jabba fears assassins, and he has too many enemies to count. Yet he basks in the crowd's appreciative roar despite only a few knowing what he even looks like.
Ciao Beso.
Inside the box, Jabba rumbles, his deep voice echoing through the sound enhancers and out across the flats.
Tam Kachi Bunta Relia, Ki Madadruda Du 1D. Welcome.
The crowd roars some more, arms and flags waving madly. Horns blare, and a new roar rises from the crowd.
Ka Baza Kundita Tam Druddle. Let the challenge begin.
Anakin and the rest of the racers climb into their pods, settle themselves in place in the seat, secure their straps. Anakin fits his old, battered racing helmet over his head.
Get ready.
The pilots flip switches, and powerful energy binders shoot between the engines, powerful electromagnetic currents arcing between coaxial plates, locking the twin engines of each pod racers together as a single unit.
Yapawa Kolka Do Rundi.
Hey, it looks like they're clearing the grid.
Flag bearers and pit crews move hastily aside, clearing the start line beneath the arc that marks the beginning and end of the race. It is up to Anakin now. Nettlety and Padme move through the crowd to the viewing platform where Obi-Wan and Padme wait. R2-D2 is already on board. They then take off the uncomfortable face coverings. Obi-Wan gives Nelith a worried, questioning look as she mounts the platform. He isn't ready to forgive her.
Is he nervous?
He's not easily distracted. That's a good sign.
And to his eye, it seems impossible that this makeshift bucket can carry Anakin to victory. Obi-Wan shakes his head.
This is pure recklessness.
The Force trusts my judgment. Perhaps you should, too.
You assume too much. We should be protecting this boy, Master, not depending on him to save us.
Alderaan didn't err when we put our fate in the hands of a girl.
Nelith turns to her, giving her appreciative glance.
Since we already went all in, let's just trust Anakin like we do with my queen.
The race will begin soon. He hides his apprehension and wishes the Force to be with Anakin. The platform lifts into position for the race like an elevator. The viewing platform locks into place, and all eyes turn toward the racers.
Start your engines.
Overhead, a red light holds the racers in place. Anakin brings down his goggles and flips a switch. His engine, as well as the engines of other racers, begin to turn over, their booming coughs and rumbles mingling with the earth-pounding roars of the 20 or so engines revving are deafening. There's no sound like it. The roar of a dozen pod racers is so loud it hurts Anakin's ears. It's like sticking a head inside a hyperdrive motivator. For him, that sound is pure adrenaline. It makes him want to go fast and win. The light goes yellow. When Padme hears the engines ignite and roar, her cheer is louder than anybody's. At that moment, anything seems possible. On the contrary, R2-D2 worried beeps. Anticipating the green, the pilots gun their engines, the massive casing shaking with the force of the power they generate, the cables that bound them to the pods and their drivers straining to break free. We see the back of Jabba's seat at an angle where we can only see his thick arm holding a living lizard. He brings his snack to his mouth, tears its head off with a bite, and spits the head out at the gong. The moment the gong sound spreads the arena, the light over the starting line flashes bright green. The pod racers shoot forward with a high-pitched scream, and the race is underway. Anakin forgets everything but the race. He shoves the control levers, hoping to establish a good position from the very beginning. The pod racer leaps forward, and Anakin's big rocket engines buck, cough, then die. Anakin freezes. He sat there in the cloud of exhaust and dust as the other pod racers shoot away from the starting line. For a split second he is in shock. Sebulba. All at once he thinks he'd sabotaged engines, then realizes he had no time or approached his pod. But it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is getting back into the race. Frantically, Anakin works the controls as podracer after podracer swerves around him in a cacophony of sound and vanishes down the track that leads into the desert. Sand fountain in the wake of their passing, clouding the air in a whirlwind of grit. In seconds, Anakin is alone, save for Ben Quadinaro's quadrupod, which sits stalled at the starting line in a mirror image of Anakin's.
And thereof. Oh wait, little Anakin has stalled.
The crowd mocks at the stalled craft. Watto's laugh is bigger than anyone else's around him. Anakin's mind races. He struggles to get his racer started. Ahead, Anakin watches Sebulba's bright orange racer and Mohanic's pod go neck and neck into the first turn by the rock formations. Mohanic doesn't know what he is up against. If he'd had a comlink, he might have tried to warn him. The pod racers fly across the desert, Starlight Flats, the first piece of terrain that the contestants of the Bunta Eve Classic have to race through.
It looks like Quadinaro's is having engine trouble also.
Quadinaro's pounds on his dashboard in frustration. Obi-Wan stops breathing.
Come on, Annie!
Anakin knows if he loses the race, Nelith, Padme, and Obi-Wan, and the ship's pilot might be stuck on Tatooine for a long time. And when you are young and pretty on Tatooine, it isn't long before you belong to Jabba. To imagine Padme chained like a slave makes his blood boil. After pressing buttons and flickering switches, finally, Anakin sees the problem. The fuel regulator had been manually adjusted to full open, and the engines had flooded. How did that happen? R2-D2 checked it, he checked it. He loses more precious seconds waiting for the extra fuel to evaporate and the engines to start again. At last, Anakin presses the ignition buttons, and the big radon ulcers roar to life. Without waiting to see if the engines would keep running, he slides the thruster bars forward and sends his pod racer screaming after the pack. The engines shoot ahead, dragging the pod and Anakin after them, leaving Quadinaro still trying to get started.
And there goes Anakin.
Obi-Wan sighs out of a small relief. R2-D2 happy beeps.
Go, Annie, go!
They all watch Anakin's racing pod through the handheld datapad, as pictures of the racers are transmitted from droid observation holocams.
He'll be hard-pressed to catch up with the leaders.
Nelith stands as if she is trying to enjoy a sunny day. Sometimes, she even closes her eyes. She doesn't even break a sweat. The racers are flying through Mushroom Mesa, the region riddled with colossal stone pillars formed over many eons by severe weathering and erosion. Sebulba is running neck and neck with Mohanic. Sebulba hits Mohanic's smaller pod with his larger one. Mohanic shakes his fist. Sebulba curses in Huttese and drives his pod into his rival, forcing him into the wall of a large rock formation. Mohanic crashes in a spectacular display of fire and smoke. Sebulba laughs. Meanwhile, Anakin has already torn across the flats and arrived at the same region. He gives chase with single-minded determination. The first set of rock formations rises up against the horizon. Anakin can see the other pod racers now. Anakin closes on them, his engines screaming. He goes by two as if they are standing still, angling his way left and then right, threading the needle of space they have left between them. Ebbe Crater Valley is pocketed with dips and craters. Sebulba is at the lead. The trailing pod racers come into view ahead of him. He's catching them, the racers blasting toward a narrow opening of Beggar's Canyon on Tatooine. Again, he works the controls, feeding power first to one engine, then the other. The dark crease of the canyon looms ahead. Anakin jams the thruster bars all the way forward, and his racer accelerates with incredible speed. Anakin threads the eye of its needle opening with skill, racing into the cool shadows beyond. Anakin works the thruster bars with small, precise movements, envisioning the course in his mind, each twist, each turn, each rise and drop of the narrow pathway. Beggar's Canyon is a canyon that cuts through the Ben's Mesa. People view the race from the balcony. There is an access ramp right next to the track, where the workers and crowd stand and watch the race. The race then continues onto a length of desert plains abutting the Dune Sea. Pilots pass through Arch Canyon, one of the most hazardous areas where natural stone arches spend a canyon's width, but Anakin speeds easily through the series of stone arches. Without other pod racers getting in his way, they are simple. The Jag Crag Gorge is a steep-sided gorge near Arch Canyon on Tatooine. The pods fly through its twisting channel marked with spires and outcroppings into the cave. Anakin's radon ulcers hum anxiously, the steelton cables drawing on the racing pod with just the right amount of give through the wicked turns. He barely dodges the dark obstacles ahead. Behind Anakin, the Alina racer Rat's Tyrol crashes into a stalactite, screaming. His pod erupts in a large explosion that quickly fills the whole cave. Anakin barely escapes the flames and exits the cave. Got to remember to watch that on the next lap. Outside the cave, pilots race through a sharply curving canyon. A vengeful tribe of 4 Tusken Raiders camp on the ridge overlooking the canyon, shoots at the pod racers with their slug throwers. Some instinct makes him veer to one side. An instant later, a shot ricochets off the rear of his pod. Good thing he dodged in time. He speeds up unevenly, trying to make the pod racer a hard target to hit. He must have been successful. No more shots strike his pod while he is still within range. They watch the distant part of the race on view screens. The track loops through narrow canyons, tall cliffs, high dunes, and flat deserts. It is treacherous. Padme doesn't know how anyone can pilot a pod racer at such speeds and survive.
Looks like a few Tusken Raiders have camped out on the canyon dune turn.
Obi-Wan and Nelith exchange worried glances. Meanwhile, Quaternaros is still unable to ignite his engine. 4 Tusken Raiders let out a war cry. Pod racer pilots are forced to keep to the outside of the bend, away from a large stone spindle while making the turn. Quaternaros curses and finally manages to start the engines of his racer, all 4 bulbous monsters roaring to life, vibrating within their casing. Engines and pod lurch as Quaternaros locks in the thrusters. But in the next instant the energy binders collapse under the strain, the connecting cables snap, and the engines hoot off in 4 separate directions in a spectacular display, with the pilot being tugged up only a few feet. The crowd gasps in shock, shielding eyes and covering ears. Large cheers and laughs from the crowd.
Oh, there goes Quaternaros' power coupling.
Quaternaros' pod drops to the ground as Sebulba screams past the arena, closely followed by all the other racers.
Sebulba. Ka pa mi chispa wada.
The crowd stands and screams. Watto is laughing with his friends, confident in Anakin's defeat.
Odi Mandrell. Kuna wa wanda dunko.
A 4th, Odi Mandrell, turns into the pits, the engines of his pod shaking and smoking as he screeches to a stop. Odi shouts at the pit droids as they rush to service the racer, swarming over the engines. Droids work on his engines, but one droid stands in front of the engine and gets sucked in, causing the engine to die. The droid gets spit out the back of the engine, very bent up. The engine lets out one final wheeze, then explodes in a puff of smoke. Odi collapses in the cockpit with a devastated scream. R2-D2 worried beeps, unable to see his master among the racers rushing into the arena.
Where is Anakin?
R2-D2 beeps something in response.
Look, here he comes.
Sure enough, coming around the bend is Anakin, quickly gaining on the pack as he explodes out of the midday glare, the big Raidonulzers howling in fury. The crowd let out boo at no-name racers.
It looks like Anakin is moving up in the field.
It is incredible. Amazing. Even Obi-Wan begins to emote, but pretends not. Lap 2. As the race progresses, wind whips by Anakin in a screaming rush, blocking him away in its white noise. Giscano sees in the view screen that Anakin is right behind him. Anakin tries to go around him, but Giscano slides sideways in the same direction, blocking him. Anakin veers to the opposite side, but the other driver seems to expect it, and cuts him off again. And again. Anakin frowns in concentration. He remembers there's a drop coming up. He pulls back, leaving an extra length between his pod racer and the one that blocks him. Then, just as the other driver goes over the drop, Anakin shoves both engine controls full open. The pod racer surges forward. It flies off the edge of the cliff and over the blocking racer, barely missing the other driver's engines. The pod comes down with a jolt that rattles Anakin's teeth, but a quick check shows all the warning lights still shining green. It worked. Teamto Pegalize, Vecnoid Male, bumps into the pod of Anakin, which in turn causes Anakin to scrape a cliff face. Pegalize nears Anakin's craft once again, but Anakin manages to swing his pod over Pegalize, effectively moving out of harm's way. But that risky move makes a protruding part of Anakin's left engine, the one Watto sabotaged prior to the race, shaky. Anakin races through the valley, flying past other racers. The part of the engine shudders violently. Anakin's pod racer display alarming. The engine part tears off, which flies toward Anakin directly. He swings his body wide, hoping to avoid, and sure enough, a fragment of he hits the seat. Anakin barely compensates in time, but the left engine begins to catch fire as the pod enters the entrance of Beggar's Canyon. Anakin eases off on the thruster bars to fix the issue. Anakin flies right into an enormous cloud of dust. In the process, he is forced to give way. Other pilots race past him. Obi-Wan lets out a low moan and scans the view screen. They lean close, our eyes straining.
Anakin's in trouble.
Obi-Wan watches this on the datapad.
Not good.
Careful, Anakin.
The tension would break her. All of her training in silence and control don't help with this agonizing tension. The usually calm Obi-Wan is twisting his tunic in his hands until it is a sodden mess. R2-D2 keeps up a constant beep of panic. Anakin's pod display beeps in an emergency. He cuts the engine power, and then the fire on the left engine goes out, yet the cockpit still beeps. Then Anakin realizes this is not Sebulba's doing. He wouldn't know exactly which part to break in order to decapitate his pod racer. Then it must be. He switches to an auxiliary system, which shows the power is only concentrated on the right engine while the left is drained out. Anakin unplugs a wire from the right side of the cockpit and inserts it into the left. The engine power floods back and distributes evenly on both radon ulcers, but it is not enough to bring them back to life. The rocks of Arch Canyon loom ahead on the horizon. Time and space are running out on Anakin. Anakin flickers an ignition switch again and again. The engine coughs for a few seconds and comes to life with a boom. The display beeps and the engines turn green. He shoves the thruster bars forward and Anakin navigates on his way in the canyon. Anakin skillfully dodges the rocks in the track. Anakin bears down on the leaders, young face intense. In the cave, using the tight confines to his advantage while others struggle, Anakin manages to pilot past the other racers. Anakin just flies past Team Pegalize as they exit the cave. Tusken Raiders, hiding in the rocks of the cliffs, fire on the racers. Anakin's pod takes another shot from the Tuskens. Team Pegalize is not so lucky, as his pod's fuel tank takes a hit, causing him to crash. The cockpit spirals out of control and rolls on the ground.
Oh, I don't care what universe you're from. That's gotta hurt.
Anakin is in 5th place, behind Clegg Holdfast, Neva Key, Mars Gwa, and Sebulba.
There's him.
At the start of the 3rd and final lap, Sebulba is in the lead, followed by Gwa, Key, Holdfast, and Anakin.
Nelith, Padme, and Obi-Wan all cheer as Anakin comes through the arena and zooms past, even though he can't hear or see them. Whenever they catch sight of Anakin, they are amazed at his skill. He swerves, plummets, corrects, and hops over other racers. He is one with the machine. He has no time to plan a move, he just moves. Then she sees a parallel between them. Isn't she moving, swerving, dodging, all without a plan? Lap 3. Anakin narrows the gap between himself and the leaders. Key tries to pass Sebulba. Sebulba waits until his rival pulls alongside, then triggers a buzzsaw below his left engine. The buzzsaw damages Key's engine, cutting apart the metal housing as if it were made of paper. Key tries frantically to move away, but he is too slow. He dives nose first into the desert, sending a wide spray of grit everywhere. Momentarily blinded, Holdfast swerves the wrong way and crashes right into Key's cockpit. Holdfast likely survived, Key did not. Seeing another wreck ahead of him, Anakin works the thruster bars smoothly, sliding past the rubbles. He is now bearing down on Sebulba and Gwa closely. Gwa takes the lead. Anakin and Sebulba are racing side by side. Sebulba decides to put an end to Anakin once and for all. He knows where all the droid observation cams are situated. He knows the angles of placement and how to avoid giving himself away. Swinging his racer close to Anakin's, he bumps Anakin's pod, making him almost crash into the wall. Anakin hits the traffic sticks on the edge of the course.
Anakin's been forced onto the service ramp.
Obi-Wan and Padme are sweating. Sebulba doesn't race fairly. He uses any dirty trick he can get away with. There are no rules. Anakin veers from the course right into a line of traffic sticks, sending them in all directions, then the wooden warning sign on the service ramp. People flee before Anakin's pod smashes into it and flies out of the course.
Anakin saw over. Nobata Wanga can recover to the dead.
Sebulba laughs at Anakin, who flies 100 feet in the air. Desperate to recover, Anakin jams his thruster bars forward and accelerates. The radon ulcers boom, his racer gives a frightening lurch. Anakin's podracer leapfrogs right behind Sebulba and Gwa. The crowd goes wild.
Amazing. A quick controlled thrust and he's back on course.
After coming out of the canyon, ahead, Mars Gwa is closing on Sebulba. Mars tries to sneak past. Anakin draws nearer to both, leapfrogging sand dunes in a long depression, easing slowly up on Mars Gwa. Sebulba reaches out of his pod's cockpit and tosses a piece of metal directly into Mars Gwa's left engine intake. Metal clashes violently against metal, and the damaged engine spews smoke and fire. Mars tries to hold the machine steady, but the failing engine bucks and loses power, causing the pod to veer sharply and crash into the ground. Anakin barely dodges Gwa's cockpit spinning around wildly, but a piece of wreckage snags the Steelton line to Anakin's left engine and releases the binding. Instantly Anakin's pod begins to swing violently at the end of its single remaining line, whipsawing back and forth. The engines continue to act in concert, locked together by the energy binders, but the racer swings like a pendulum.
Anakin's spinning out of control.
Obi-Wan and Padme turn pale. The crowd and Watto go wild. Padme reaches for Nelith's hand. Her hand squeezes his until her bones come together. She doesn't even feel it. Grimly, Anakin hangs onto the power controls. No steering, no stability. By instinct and feeling, he keeps the pod racer on course. Anakin works the stabilizer pedals with his feet, which hold the pod steady. The other two racers sweep by him, giving chase to Sebulba. Anakin takes the magnetic retriever on the floor and extends it out of the left side, trying to make contact with the loose cable. Sweat and grit coat his face. After several tries, he snags the loose engine cable with the retriever and maneuvers it back to its hook. Then a bump. Sebulba has returned and hit Anakin's pod with his, causing Anakin to drop the retriever. The cable swings loose again. Sebulba laughs and flies past Anakin. Padme gasps in terror. Obi-Wan closes his eyes with his hand.
It is over.
No!
Nelith keeps her eyes on the screen. Watto in his seat laughs.
Those farmers made a foolish bargain.
Anakin is devastated, realizing there is nothing he can do to bring the cable. Then he closes his eyes. Breathes in and out. He blocks everything away, sounds and movements alike. Anakin is slowly disappearing into the workings of his racer, becoming one with its engines, feeling the strain and tug on each rivet and screw. He extends his hand and reaches for the cable.
Wait, look!
Obi-Wan looks at the datapad again, which shows Anakin reaching toward the loose cable with his hand. Nelith has not abandoned hope.
You can do it, Anakin.
R2-D2 surveys the screen with curiosity. There is only himself and the machine, melding his body with the pod, the engines, and the loose cable until he is a part of them. The cable begins to move toward the hand. Moment by moment, the symbiosis deepens, joining them, giving Anakin insights and understandings that transcend his senses and knowledge, projecting his mind past the present and into a place others cannot reach. Obi-Wan's eyes widen.
Reach out with your feelings.
Anakin focuses his concentration on snagging the loose engine cable. As if Anakin's flesh has turned into a magnet, the cable whips into his hand. Anakin catches it. Padme gets excited and screams in joy. Her throat is raw with screaming. R2-D2 happy beeps. We see Obi-Wan's astonished face as he finally comes to understand. The boy is special, and he begins to believe. Watto's expressions change as he watches Anakin snatching the cable. A realization hits him. Anakin takes the cable and maneuvers it back to its hook. He then jams the thruster bars forward once more. Stabilized at the ends of the Steelton lines, the pod holds steady now as the raid annulsers buck, and the racer accelerates after the leaders. Over the course, Sebulba is on the lead, dodging the rocks in the way. Anakin speeds up through the set of caves, right on his tail.
He's catching up to Sebulba.
Inkabunga.
Sebulba and Anakin angle their pods to fit into the narrow gap between escarpments. They burst into the clear once more. Down the flat, open final stretch of the course, the pod racers accelerate, side by side. Anakin tries to win the lead. The only racer left ahead of him is Sebulba's. There is no mistaking the odd shape of those engines. He'll show him what a slave can do. Side by side, they head toward the finish line. Infuriated by Anakin's dogged persistence, Sebulba triggers the buzzsaw. He swerves, deliberately slamming his pod into Anakin's. Sparks fly. Once, twice, but on the third strike, the buzzsaw gets stuck in the protective armor Anakin has installed to his pod, locking them together. The armor was scrappy and improvised in haste, but it works. Furious at Sebulba's maneuver, Anakin fights with his control, trying to break free, but the pods are hooked tight. In his pod, Sebulba is frowning at Anakin. If they cross the finish line together, they'd tie. Neither of them wants that. The crowd cheers.
That little human being is out of his mind.
Punda ta punda.
They're side by side.
Bongo do bongo.
Padme freezes, her gaze glued to the datapad. There were no more convenient drop-offs coming up. He wouldn't be able to play the same trick he'd used on that other driver, early in the race. Something else, then. He tries to unlock the buzzsaw by pulling away from Sebulba's pod racer, but they are too tightly caught. Their racers getting locked together like this could hurt Sebulba as much as it could hurt Anakin. Sebulba screams in frustration, jamming his racer against Anakin's in an effort to force him into the ground. In the process, Sebulba's buzzsaw begins to shudder with sparks. Feel. Don't think. Trust your instincts. Leaning as hard as he can on Racer's steering arm, Anakin slams his thruster bars back and forth, trying to break away from Sebulba's racer. Meanwhile, they are screaming down the final stretch at top speed. He pushes the steering arm harder, harder. Snap, it breaks. The buzzsaw tears off with parts of Sebulba's engine. Sebulba screams. Sebulba's energy binders cut off and his engines fly in different directions, screaming out of control. One engine slams into a piece of the ancient statuary and disintegrates in flame. Then the second goes, ramming into the sand and exploding in a massive fireball. The towing cables break free, Sebulba's pod skids through the flaming wreckage of the engines, twisting and bumping violently along the desert floor to a smoking stop. Anakin flies overhead toward the arena. Sebulba slams his fists against his pod in disgust.
Pudu.
Anakin flies by as the crowd stands, cheering. Anakin races over the finish line, the winner. Anakin becomes, at 15 years of age, the youngest winner ever of the Bunta Eve race. Padme screams and laughs and jumps up and down as Anakin zooms into the arena. Not like a princess. Like a girl. At that moment, she is glad to be disguised as a farmer, for it gives her freedom to do the things that the princess cannot. Padme is surprised that even Nelith and Obi-Wan look excited. Any irritation Padme has ever felt for the Jedi left in a rush.
So the Jedi do have emotions, after all.
Something you can't see or touch has just helped you reach a goal. Do you believe in the unseen now?
Irritation comes back. She touches the control pad to lower the viewing platform to the ground. Obi-Wan grins.
You can never get the last word with Master Nelith.
The two-headed announcer calls the finish.
Skywalker Anakin. The crowds are going nuts. Oa oa.
Anakin brings the pod to a skidding halt in the center of the raceway, and shuts down the Redonulzers. Anakin is dirty and ragged, his hair spiky and his face streaked with sweat and grime. His face is wet with gritty sweat. His jacket is torn in several places, and there is blood on his clothing where he had slashed his arm on a jagged piece of metal during the battle with Sebulba. His ears are filled with the hiss of the cooling turbines and the roar of the cheering crowd. The twin suns glare down out of the cloudless sky, glinting off the Redonulzers. The crowd surges toward Anakin's racer, a significant portion of them are slaves. He guesses him winning the Bunta Classic gives the Tatooine slaves hope. Maybe not that they could win the race, but that they could achieve whatever they want if they really work at it. But Anakin is so tired that he can't even reach up to undo his straps to meet them. As the engines die, he sees his companions running toward him from the platform. Anakin wakes up and unstraps himself to climb out.
Annie!
Padme runs ahead, her eyes streaming tears of joy and relief.
We owe you everything, Annie!
You have brought hope to those who had none.
Just feeling this good alone was worth it.
Anakin has just enough time to hug Padme close to him. They owe him everything. At last, they can leave Tatooine. R2-D2 scuttles around them, jolting his droid body around in happiness. He gazes at the brawling, shouting crowd in the galleries. Fights are already erupting over bets lost. Winners crow. Anakin has been a long shot. When more crowd converges moments later, they hoist Anakin into a loft and carry him away, chanting his name and his new title. Watto flies over the crowd toward Anakin in undisguised fury.
You swindled me.
You swindled me! I fixed the engines last night. You broke it!
Watto turns to Nelith, shaking with rage.
You are a Jedi. I saw him using the Force.
Whenever you gamble, eventually you'll lose. Bring the ship parts to the main hangar right away. We will come by your shop later, so you can release the boy.
You can't even. It wasn't a fair bet. I will report you to the UTS.
Obi-Wan looks him up and down with a chilly stare. He pulls his poncho up to show off his lightsaber.
Would you like to discuss it with the Jedi Order? I'm sure they can settle this.
Watto jerks as if stung, terrified.
No. I want no more of your Jedi tricks. Take him. Be gone.
Watto wheels away and flies out, body hunched beneath madly beating wings. The cheering, chanting crowd sweeps Anakin up and carries him off on their shoulders. He never knew winning feels this good. He has done it. He's won. From the sky, the Sith probe droid watches the scene with great interest. Footnote. The podracing scenes play the generally same as the movie. This entire podracing sequence was one jaw-dropping filmmaking and, 20 years later, it still holds up. The build-up, the sense of speed, clarity, the use of silence in the first half, and various situations Anakin gets challenged make up for a nail-biting action set piece. However, Redone makes some changes. The geography of several scenes makes no sense in the film and Redone rearranges them for consistency. I had to look up the map of the track and compare the movie shots to accurately depict the race's progression. The order of Anakin's pod malfunctioning scenes is reversed. Now, the engine catches on fire in the second lap while the cable gets unhooked in the third lap. I found the pod cockpit spinning out of control to be a much more intense set piece and it makes more sense for it to be happening at the last. The biggest problem with the race however is the lack of the character-related stakes. In A New Hope, in order to blow up the Death Star, Luke has to overcome his internal struggle and open himself to the Force.
Use the Force, Luke. Let go, Luke. Luke, trust me.
His computer's on. Luke, you switched off your targeting computer. What's wrong?
Nothing. I'm all right.
We don't get anything like that the pod race, which is all an external struggle. Redone sets Anakin to fight himself before the race, with Nelith explaining to him about the Force and how to use it. When one of the main straps on Anakin's engines that link to pod gets unhooked, instead of Anakin using the wrench to grab the strap, he uses the Force to catch it. This reinforces Anakin's Force power, a homage to Luke's use of the Force in the trench run from A New Hope. It was a missed opportunity that there was no moment in which Obi-Wan believes in Anakin in this movie, so Redone has Obi-Wan also watch the race. This is the moment Obi-Wan gets convinced that Anakin has potential. By Anakin entering the race not yet ready, and then having to sort his flaw out during the race, the stakes are clearer, building up to an emotional catharsis. In Redone, Sebulba uses illegal equipment against Anakin, and this becomes his demise. It makes the race more thrilling by stacking the odds Anakin has to overcome. This moment is a payoff to Anakin surveying Sebulba's pod and adding protective materials to the engines on the night before the race. Redone also cuts down the appearance of Jabba the Hutt as it ruins his reveal in Return of the Jedi. Jabba appears in the game, but in a way that doesn't reveal what he looks like. Within an hour, the arena outside is soon to begin a ceremony for the winners. The crowd still remains. A few pit droids are still engaging in salvaging pieces of wreckage from the race, coming and going in steady pursuit of their work. The racers have been stored or hauled away for repairs. In the main hangar, Padme helps the Nubian ship parts getting loaded on anti-grav repulsor sled harnessed to EAPs, guided by pit droids, to transport them to the crash site. Watto had made delivery as promised. The pit droids play around the newly delivered parts.
Hey, be careful.
Obi-Wan checks the container straps and loads the parts on the EAP's harness with R2-D2. There is nothing to keep them here. The announcer's voices outside echo into the hangar.
The victory ceremony will be held in 5 minutes. The medals will be presented by Mighty Jabba the Hutt.
But Anakin remains in the hangar, standing, looking over his damaged pod. His hair is still matted and his face is streaked with dirt.
You seem a bit worse for wear.
No, I'm okay. It's just that I can't believe what's been happening since yesterday. Everything's changing so fast.
You can't stop change, any more than you can stop the suns from rising.
She places her hand on his shoulder.
Now you can make your dreams come true, Anakin. You're free.
Will you take me with you? Am I to become a Jedi?
Obi-Wan walks over to Nelith and Anakin.
You have every right to become one, Anakin, but you may not be accepted by the Council.
He isn't exactly sure how the Council works, but he has a feeling it must have been made up of other Jedi Knights.
Training to be a Jedi will not be an easy challenge, and if you succeed, it will be a hard life.
Anakin's eyes are bright and expectant. The Nelith could have told him he'd have to shovel bantha poo for the rest of his days. It wouldn't have mattered if it meant being a Jedi. He catches his breath as a dazzling new possibility occurs to him.
It's what I want. What I've always dreamed about.
Obi-Wan gives a slight nod of understanding. He then turns to the Nubian ship parts.
Now, we've got to get these parts back to the ship.
Anakin flashes her a joyous grin.
Can I go back to the crowd?
Sure, enjoy the applause, Skywalker.
Anakin gives a little half nod and dashes off to the arena. The massive cheering of the crowd reaches the hangar.
We haven't much time. We should depart from Tatooine before the Hutts or bounty hunters take notice.
Nelith watches Anakin getting all the cheers in the world.
We can spare a few minutes to get what he deserves.
Obi-Wan steps closer to her and coughs. He hesitates. He has many things he wants to say, that he had come to know Anakin better, that he had begun to see the boy's potential, that he had been wanting to ditch Nelith. His rugged features soften for a minute. His eyes twinkle.
You were right about Anakin, Master, and I am embarrassed. It was not my place to decide the boy's fate. I do not wish to be a difficult apprentice.
Nelith, surprised, looks at him for a long moment. A faint smile appears.
Nor have you been. You have been honest with me. Honesty is never wrong. I foresee you will become a great Jedi Knight with Anakin.
Thank you.
Go to the ship, first with Padme, and take a rest. I will handle the dealings with the Toydarian.
Yes, Master.
Obi-Wan ties the last knot on the EAP and heads off. Though the race is over, Obi-Wan still feels uneasy. She does not see the same things Obi-Wan sees. Useless burdens, pointless projects, unnecessary distractions. He now senses it as she does. He is special, Nelith had told Obi-Wan, and he has agreed. He knows it, too. Anakin is different. He is willful, even reckless in his choices. He is strong, but he dissipates his strength on causes that do not merit his attention. She would learn who this boy is meant to be, and now, Obi-Wan is in the same boat. Footnote. Obi-Wan's character arc of not trusting Anakin, but ends up accepting him still carries over from the film to Redone. The problem with Obi-Wan's character arc in the movie is there is no turning point for Obi-Wan to change his mind about Anakin. He completely changes his thoughts from here, the moment Obi-Wan argues against Kagan.
It's not disrespect, Master, it's the truth. From your point of view? The boy is dangerous. They all sense it, why can't you?
His fate is uncertain. He's not dangerous. The Council will decide Anakin's future. That should be enough for you. Now get on board.
To here, the moment Obi-Wan apologizes, and these scenes are only separated 3 minutes from each other.
I'm sorry for my behavior, Master. It's not my place to disagree with you about the boy.
There is no catalyst for the change of his mind, so there is no payoff for his character transformation. Redone fixes this by giving the clear catalyst, which is the podracing sequence in which Obi-Wan witnesses Anakin's capability, thus believing Nelith at last. It's an actual character arc now. The probe droid trails Anakin and Nelith walking down the hot, sun-blasted route to Watto's shop from the sky. The suns are sinking. This is a favorite time of day for Anakin, the last gasp of the strangled setting sun. For the rest of the day he has basked in the glory of winning the race. Everywhere he goes, people wave and smile. He feels funny. He'd never been a hero before. They want to play and talk, but he is distracted. He needs to depart, fast.
You're a free man, Anakin. And you'll need a surname when you join the Jedi Order.
I haven't thought about it before because I never needed one. I have no family to name after.
I'd hate to see you naming yourself Anakin Watto.
Anakin Jin?
After all, she is going to be his new family. The crowd snags Anakin's gaze, and he turns his head. All the slaves in the neighborhood come by to congratulate him.
Anakin Skywalker.
Nelith smiles back. With slave boy Anakin winning a pod race, she wonders if the word Skywalker would come to mean more than a pod racing champion. It could become a symbol, an ideal, or a mantle among the slaves on Tatooine. Anakin Skywalker leads Nelith into the doorway to Watto's shop. Footnote. One of the problems created from the "I am your father" twist is that the Lars family kept Luke's surname Skywalker, even though they wanted to hide him from Vader. This is worsened in the prequels, where it is revealed the Lars family didn't even move. They are living in the same homestead Vader has visited, on Vader's home planet. Vader knows for a fact that the Lars family is his relatives. And Lars didn't even rename Luke or took him as their son, like the Organa family did with Leia. They didn't even attempt to conceal Luke's identity. Although Redone can't really get around this plot hole, it does remedy it. In Redone, slave Anakin earning the title of Skywalker, Podracing champion, kind of vindicates why Owen kept Luke's surname on Tatooine. Skywalker became a favorite surname for freed slaves to adopt for a symbolic reason. Skywalker became a lofty name and a representative word for fighting the oppression of slavery, thus it became a common surname. Considering Rick Oley, who is Owen Lars, isn't related to Anakin in Redone, it is plausible for him to pretend as the former slave and give the child the name Skywalker, as the other children of the slaves received. Still, I acknowledge it is a stretch, but at least there is an explanation. Watto puts a small remote device on Anakin's collar. Anakin seems terrified.
Are you sure it won't blow up?
Don't worry.
Watto turns to Nelith standing next to Anakin.
You're just as much of a gambler, Jedi. Today, luck was on your side.
If you want to call it that. Luck is just a word for a force you can't explain.
Watto snorts. He presses the button on the remote, and a loud beep sounds, startling Anakin for a moment. The collar comes off, deactivated. Watto throws the device away. Watto's mouth works as if chewing something, his snout wrinkling over his protruding teeth.
Dong. Bombs are off. Now get out of here.
The slave transmitter neutralization didn't take long, but it leaves Anakin feeling odd, as if he has become an entirely new and different person. It seemed impossible that Watto would give him up. He never thought not being a slave would feel so strange. With a renewed sense of liberation, Anakin looks at Watto with a vicious stare. He can't stand him. He can't stand being on in this shop for one more second. He's already wasted too much of his life here. Watto is taken aback. His chest and throat tighten. There is a hushed silence. R2-D2 next to him beeps.
Pack your things. We are leaving.
Every minute they stay in one location, they place themselves in danger. Anakin takes a deep breath to steady himself. He feels like he is on remote, as if he is not in complete control of his own legs as they carry him into the harsh sunlight from the doorway. It is hard to think clearly. Everything that had happened since the Jedi arrived on Tatooine seemed more like a dream than a reality.
Let's go, R2.
He walks out of the shop with Obi-Wan and the droid follows. Watto's eyes go wide, and his mouth opens in a silent exclamation. Watto chases after him, shouting.
You don't get the droid. That droid is mine.
I made it, so it belongs to me.
The twin suns are sinking when Anakin comes out into the yard and walks in silence down a series of side streets, his eyes taking in familiar sights he would not soon see again, remembering his life here, saying goodbye. Nelith leans to Anakin's side.
Now, be brave and don't look back.
There is not even a feeling of homesickness growing inside Anakin. Watto screams at him.
Stop, you Tieves. You great gobs of Bantapudu, Maklunki. My business is doomed. Cuba, Kayaba de Anko, Chiscargu.
Anakin quits listening and strides away with R2-D2 and Nelith. Braver now, more determined, shouldering his pack, he keeps his eyes fixed on a point well past the streets, toward the binary sunset that are about to sink below the horizon of the Mos Espa cityscape. Anakin marches past Nelith. As she told, he never looks back. Night lay over the planet of Aldera, but the silence of Aldera exceeds even the normally experienced by those anticipating sleep. Plates of meals are on the floor, food spilled and thrown away, uneaten. The prison gate opens and Viceroy Newt Gunray moves into the camp to face the Queen, guarded by OOM-9 and other battle droids. Their feet step on the food on the floor. One of the Alderanian prisoners stands and blocks their way to the Queen. Newt points his finger at him and a blaster bolt from OOM-9's blaster flies into the daring prisoner's chest in seconds. Newt Gunray remains relaxed and comfortable as he takes note of the fear of prisoners. But the Queen is having none of it, however. Steadfast even now, she faces Gunray with anger and determination, her white-painted face levels, her eyes challenging. Newt Gunray glares at her.
When are you going to give up this pointless strike?
The Queen says flat, her words holding firm against the turmoil and agony that is racking her.
I will give up the protest, Viceroy Gunray, when Alderaan.
Newt Gunray kicks a serving tray across the ground.
Alderaan is lost. Your people are starving.
Breha Antilles stiffens.
Alderaan will not be intimated, not even at the cost of innocent lives.
Perhaps you should worry more about yourself, Your Majesty. The odds are good that you are going to die much sooner than your people.
Sio Bibble joins in.
This invasion will gain you nothing. The people have decided. They will not live in tyranny.
Enough of this.
He turns to the Queen.
I'm sorry, but if you are not going to cooperate, I'm forced to resort to a more extreme solution on you.
The Queen stares silently at Newt, unflinching, trembling with rage.
Am I to be executed?
There are individuals in our alliance who have a strong interest in your demise, Your Majesty. I'm sure they will push hard to have you included in the executions. I'm sorry, but without your cooperation, I must turn you over to them for justice.
Justice.
She echoes in an incredulous tone. And then there is silence. Newt waits patiently for a few moments, then turns and nods to OOM-9.
Maybe the time has come to show that the Separatists are a force to reckon with. Take her to the palace.
Roger, roger.
Shock and terror ripple through the prisoners as the droids begin to tear the Queen from the prisoners, who try to hold her. The droid's speed and efficiency of the action are chilling. A measure of calmness returns to Newt Gurney, watching the droids taking the Queen away from Camp 5. The more she thinks, the more certain she becomes that she is going to die. Hovering above the sand-packed street as it follows Anakin and Nelith away from the hovels, a probe droid watches over Anakin's shed. It descends from the sky. The door bangs open, and Anakin runs in, while Nelith watches him just outside the doorway. As Nelith stands there, she hears a mad scream, distant but clear.
The Sith have returned.
Although the voice is faint, it snaps her to attention.
Everyone must listen.
It is coming from the street, and the voice is getting dimmer. Nelith needs to hear him.
Where are you going?
Anakin, continue packing. I'll be back in a minute.
She races in the direction of the street, leaving a confused Anakin alone in the shed. Nelith reaches where the sound is coming from. The crowd is gathering around the crazy Biff, who is running and screaming the same words everywhere to warn people.
The Sith have returned.
That Biff has gone mad.
The Biff is shouting in his awkward basic.
Not lying. The Sith killed all my friends. Look.
What he shows next shocks Nelith to the core. The Biff is showing the severed hand of the Trandoshan bounty hunter.
This hand, the hand of my friend. Do you see? He chopped it off with the lightsaber, and many more.
The hand is unmistakably cut with a lightsaber, for the wound was cauterized. Just as Nelith steps forward to talk, to bring him as a witness before the council, the Hutt clan's gay Marine guards rush out of the crowd to seize him.
Believe me, not crazy. Get out. Leave Mos Espa. Leave Tatooine. The Sith are coming.
The guards drag the Biff away to take care of him. Although Mos Espa is ran by the mob, there are still rules, unwritten rules. If a small-time criminal gets caught stealing from a tourist, the Hutts will deal with them. While they might not kill them, they make clear that a second offense would be fatal. Displaying the chopped hand in front of the tourists and screaming to leave Tatooine during the Bunta Eve Classic, they would get no forewarning.
He won a one-way ticket into a Salek.
Nelith can do nothing but watch, sending her heartful thanks to the Biff for confirming the Sith are on her tail. Though she can think of hundreds of better ways to make this finding public. It doesn't take Anakin long to pack, he hasn't owned much anyway. Anakin throws the last of his things in a small backpack for the preparation to leave the planet. After all the excitement, cleaning up has a pleasantly familiar feel to Anakin. His life on Tatooine would soon be gone, and the race, he tries not to think about the race. It had been wonderful to win, but it has been a central part of his memories. And he can't forget the flames rising from the wrecks. It could have been him. He grabs the Jedi doll and is about to throw it into the bag, then stops. He touches for a moment, reminiscing, deep in his thoughts. Happiness roils through Anakin, threatening to sweep him away, the happiness he felt at finding the thing he wanted most in all the world within reach, to be a Jedi, to journey down the space lanes of the galaxy. Now he has the chance he has always wanted for himself. He closes his eyes and leaves the doll there. Anakin opens the door, and before he leaves the shed, he looks back at the room. A nearly empty shed with the Jedi doll still placed on the shelf. Anakin stands at the entrance for a moment, caught in a mix of emotions. He has nothing to say to it. Trying to forget everything about Tatooine, it is time to let go. Then Anakin has a strange feeling, like they're being followed. POV shot of the probe droid as Anakin turns. He is staring at frame straight on. Then the glowing blade of Nelith's lightsaber hums out of nowhere and slices through frame. A loud crack, and frame tears and splits. Maul has been monitoring and controlling the probe droid's movement via a portable view screen. That view screen goes dark. An excellent sign. Maul grins. It's the Jedi, all right. Once again amazed by the Jedi's speed, Anakin gasps as the lightsaber sweeps through a spherical black repulsor lift device that had been hovering in the air at their backs. He rushes out of the shed. The thing he'd cut out of the air was about the size of a loaf of bread. Now sliced in two, its parts lay sparking and fizzing on the ground. Bending, Nelith examines the droid. She replies in a grim tone.
Probe droid.
Anakin kneels to inspect a cluster of metal parts still sparking and fizzing in the sand. The acrid smell of ozone and burning insulation hangs in the dry air.
Very unusual. It's not like anything I've seen before.
Nelith scans the street, eyes sharp and bright as she casts up and down the... She then clicks off the lightsaber and looks at Anakin.
We haven't much time.
She starts running. Anakin rises after putting the fragments into his bag and follows Nelith fast. Maul focuses his mind. The Jedi are out there. He will meet them soon. He cannot bring the moment closer by wishing for it. They are his enemy, and he will beat them because he is better, stronger, and smarter. He has weapons they don't have. He has his anger. And his most important weapon, he has no mercy. Signaling another probe droid above him to use maximum speed, Darth Maul climbs on his scythe-shaped speeder bike and kicks an accelerator. The probe droid follows Maul over the desert floor, scanning his surroundings. The heat slams down on him, and he is glad. It will slow the Jedi. He bends over, eyes focused on the landscape ahead, searching for the movement that will show him his enemy. All he sees is sand, dirt and dunes, yellow ground, orange sky. Once out in the desert, in the open, Nelith, Anakin, and R2-D2 pick up the pace. They run across the hot sands on the outskirts of Mos Espa as fast as they can. The heat makes it hard for Anakin to keep up, but he does the best he can. All the while, still harboring a vague sense of unease, Anakin and Nelith's eyes and minds are searching, the former the landscape of Tatooine, the latter the landscape of the Force. Nelith's instincts have alerted her to the probe droid tracking them, and her Jedi training in the ways of the Force warns her now of something far more dangerous. She can feel a shifting in the balance of things that suggests an intrusion on the harmony that the Force requires, a dark weight descending like a massive stone. Anakin is only a little way behind when the Alderaanian spacecraft comes into sight, a haven of safety, standing on its landing struts. It sits 300 meters away, metal skin gleaming dully in the sunlight. The little pit droids are still fixing on the Alderaanian spacecraft. She is a beauty, Anakin thinks, but Nelith doesn't slow down.
Nelith, sir, wait!
Nelith glances over her shoulder to give her response and offer encouragement. Instead, she catches sight of the speeder and its dark-cloaked rider bearing down on Anakin.
Anakin, drop to the ground.
Without hesitation, Anakin throws himself face down on the hot sand. He does what he was told, and not a second too soon. The others would have hesitated or turned, but his instincts are sharp. He hears a high whine and feels a rush of wind on his back. If he'd been standing, he would have been skewered. When he raises his head a moment later, he is just in time to see a man in a black, hooded cloak on a speeder bike. Nelith pulls her lightsaber out, the green blade comes, the weapon held before him in two hands. The speeder comes at him, a saddle-shaped vehicle. The primal scream has barely sounded before he is on top of Nelith, wheeling the speeder aside deftly at the last moment, closing off its thruster, and leaping from the seat, igniting the crimson lightsaber in midair, all in one swift movement. He carries a lightsaber of another make, and the weapon is cutting at the Jedi Master even before the attacker's feet have touched the ground. Nelith, surprised by Maul's quickness and ferocity, barely blocks the blow with his own weapon, the blade sliding apart with a harsh rasp. The attacker spins away in a whirl of dark clothing, then attacks anew, lightsaber slashing at his intended prey. Anakin climbs to his feet, watching in confusion as the two men slash at each other. Nelith is battling a dark-caped figure with a horned head. Bold markings of red and black covered a demonic face in strange, jagged patterns beneath the crown of stunted horns encircling its head. Man-shaped and humanoid, his slitted eyes and hooked teeth are nevertheless feral and predatory, and his howl is a hunter's challenge to his prey. Anakin watches the acrobatic way he moves, the economy and power of his gestures. Anakin knows there is no way he can help. Fighting to hold her ground, Nelith catches sight of him out of the corner of her eye.
Go! Tell them to take off!
In a rush of emotion dominated by fear and doubt, Anakin and our 2D2 race past the shouting pit droids for the Nubian spacecraft, hoping he would reach it in time. Nelith blocks him again and again, but cannot not find an opening that would provide any chance of escape. Maul uses the shifting sand as resistance, but the sand doesn't seem to hamper Nelith. Sweat streaking his body, Anakin keeps running. And as tired as he is from the long run from Mos Espa, he never runs faster than he does when he bolts for the starship. He practically flies up the landing ramp and into the ship's forward hold. Anakin and his droid rush into the cockpit and find a sleeping Obi-Wan, Padme, and Rick Oli checking out the craft's control panel, who have been wondering how long it takes to deactivate Anakin's transmitters. Anakin bursts out of the door, gasping for breath.
Nelith is in trouble! It's him!
What?
She said to take off, now!
Obi-Wan senses a great disturbance in the Force, and his master. Something is very wrong. Obi-Wan turns to Rick.
I sense a disturbance, too. Fly low, and keep the ramp open.
But the repair...
Anakin pushes the lever and ignites the engine. The big repulsor lifts kick in with a low growl. The pilot puts his hands on the controls.
Those clankers had better have those parts repaired by now, or there'll be hell to pay.
The sleek transport rises and wheels smoothly about. The ship is airborne in moments, without even waiting to close the entry ramp. Rick Oli circles above the desert.
I don't see anything.
Peering anxiously through the cockpit windows, Anakin spots a small cloud of dust in the distance. Anakin points at the corner of the viewport, and they all catch the sight of Nelith engaging in battle with the dark-garbed, demonic attacker outside.
Over there!
What in the...
As terrifying as it is, it also gives Anakin a moment to wonder. He'd heard from the spacers who passed through Mos Espa that Jedi are the most powerful fighters in the galaxy, but that thing in the dark cloak seems at least as strong as Nelith. Could it possibly be the Sith? Regardless, Anakin is glad that Nelith is on his side.
Do you have a holorecorder on this ship?
The pilots make some inputs.
Turning it on.
The ship schemes across the surface of the desert, barely a meter above the tops of the dunes. A holocom system attached to the Nubian ship's bottom focuses its lens. Moving through the air toward Nelith's position, the camera captures the combatants surge back and forth across the flats, lightsabers flashing brightly with each blow struck, sand and grit swirling in all directions. Rick takes the spacecraft toward them quickly, skimming the ground barely higher than a speeder bike, coming in from behind the attacker, its ramp still lowered, hoping that Nelith would see the open entry ramp as the ship passes. She will see it. She has to see it. Obi-Wan worries. In a fight as fierce as that one, even a small distraction could be fatal. Obi-Wan rushes out of the cockpit to the forward hold. As the ship passes over the battle, Nelith feels a surge in the Force. She realizes the ship flying over them a few feet off the ground. She leaps onto the lowered rampway of the transport, gaining purchase, one hand grasping a strut for support. But the horned attacker is already in pursuit, racing out of the haze and leaping onto the still extended ramp as the ship rises. Balanced precariously against the sway of the ship, eyes flaring in rage, he fights to keep his footing. When Maul is about to strike Nelith from his back, Obi-Wan rushes to the ramp from the hatchway. He levels his lightsaber and swings a powerful, two-handed blow at Maul. Maul blocks it, but only barely, but in the process loses his balance. Obi-Wan's blow sweeps him away, clear of the ramp and off into space. Maul drops back toward the desert floor, lands in a crouch, and rises instantly to his feet. Obi-Wan grabs a ship's floor above with one hand and Nelith with the other. He shouts at the cockpit.
Go!
On the sand, Maul stands watching in frustration as the Nubian ship closes and the spacecraft rockets away. Soon it will be just a speck in the distance. Maul tastes sand in his mouth. The Jedi are gone. Maul races to the fallen speeder biker and climbs into it. Stomping on the accelerator, he heads back to his ship. The wind rises. It drives the sand against him furiously, sharp pricks against his face and exposed skin. The dust chokes his throat, but he doesn't notice it. The Nubian spacecraft accelerates from the planet of Tatooine. Anakin and Padme rush down into the main hold to find Obi-Wan looking over Nelith lying on the cool metal floor of the entry, her clothing dusty and damp with her sweat, her body bruised and battered. She breathes deeply, waiting for her pounding heart to quiet. R2-D2 looks over her and beeps.
Are you all right?
Obi-Wan has never seen her in such bad shape after a fight. If they hadn't gotten to her when they did.
Are you okay, Master?
I think so.
She pants. She sets up, and slowly begins to breathe more normally.
That was a surprise I won't forget.
Anakin notices something else. He moves toward it while Obi-Wan talks with Nelith.
What was it?
A male Zabrak, I believe. He was well trained in the Jedi arts. I sensed an oppressive aura of the dark side I have not felt before.
So this confirms the Sith.
His young face mirrors her concern. Meanwhile, Anakin is looking out the viewport. R2-D2 beeps at Anakin.
Anakin?
She comes over to him. Anakin catches his breath and watches the sky change. Below them, Mos Espa is no larger than a sandbox and gets smaller all the time. Then the sky turns from blue to black and he is staring down at a bare, sand-colored planet. Beyond it glows the familiar twin suns. Everywhere else, the first stars are coming out, then the sky is awash with sparkling stars, small pinpricks against the deepening black of the night sky. Worlds he has never seen and can only dream about waited out there, and one day he would visit them. For the first time in his life, he is in space. He wants to be the first one to see all the stars. To get away from Tatooine, to go to places where no one knows that he had ever been a slave, to see all the places the Jedi must have seen and more.
Looks so small from here, right?
I dreamed about leading a slave rebellion. I dreamed of holding a laser sword, and of driving every last Hutt, criminal, and bounty hunter off Tatooine. But never in my life had I thought I would leave there.
Padme nods. Without her, Anakin would have been a fish in a bowl for the rest of his life. Anakin could have stayed at that window staring at the stars for a long time, but he notices something strange.
What's that?
Padme notices a dot in the yellow background of the planet. Warm expressions quickly disappear from her face.
Master Jedi?
Nelith and Obi-Wan come over to them and stare out the window. The dot expands, revealing to be the Sith starfighter, Scimitar, the same one that shot down the ship, and it is chasing again. The Sith are never restless. Their discipline is no less absolute in delay than in action. Nelith directs Anakin with a meaningful look.
Stay here.
Nelith and Obi-Wan rush down the hallway into the cockpit.
Pilot.
I know.
His face flushed and anxious.
Calculating the coordinates. We'll make a jump in 2 minutes.
Not this again.
Nelith stands next to them, feeling the weight of his gaze as it shifts to find her, steady and unwavering. Maul smiles and locks onto the Nubian ship. His Sith training was extensive. His master was concerned not only with his physical and intellectual perfection, but also his piloting skills. Many times his knowledge of starship and various communication devices and weapons has come in handy. This is such a time. Anakin, Padme, and R2-D2 look out the window. The thought of meeting up with the Dark Warrior again makes Anakin shiver. Anakin finds a macro binoculars on the side and surveys the chasing ship in the distance. Anakin makes an important discovery.
Do you have a comm link?
Here.
She gives him the device. Anakin screams into the comlink.
That ship uses pulsar tracking for its weapons. Spin the ship! It will make it difficult for him to get a reading on us.
Rick Oli responds to the comm.
Just spin?
Just spin!
Rick Oli seems doubtful.
Okay, I'll try.
The pilot flips a series of levers and puts the Nubian into a slow spin. The Scimitar's lock loses focus. Frustrated, Maul fires the lasers anyway, hoping to stick. The Royal Transport accelerates and spins, whipping past lasers. He slams his joystick with a fist.
It's working!
Keep doing that! Don't stop!
Maul switches to the manual aiming and pours lasers at the target. Although the majority of laser fire misses the target, a laser bolt hammers into the ship, causing sparks and smoke to explode from one panel, sending the ship reeling. The ship rocks. Something must have made it through the shields, Anakin thinks as he straightens.
He's hitting us!
He switched to manual aiming!
Explosions sound close by. An alarm sounds, shrill and angry. The transport shudders, its power drive stalling momentarily in a high-pitched whine. For a brief moment they are tumbling out of control. Then Rick Oli pulls back hard on the controls.
Something's wrong.
He announces quietly, fighting the steering, feeling the ship shudder beneath.
Shield generator's been hit.
They continue to spin, so close that Maul's cannons have only the smaller chance at hitting the target. But without shields even a glancing hit can be disastrous.
Any idea now?
Anakin glances around to be helpful and finds an airlock at one end of the compartment in the main hold, lit with the emergency red light. Anakin then turns to R2-D2.
R2!
The droid beeps in fear of going outside.
You're the only one who can do it! Go! Go!
R2-D2 rotates his head left and right, refusing. Padme begins pushing the droid toward the airlock.
Fix it, or you'll find yourself floating home.
Despite R2-D2 locking his brakes in his wheels, he slides to the airlock under Anakin's push. Eventually, the droid complies. The droid enters the airlock lift and gets sucked up toward the top of the ship. An airlock snaps open, and R2-D2 pops out of the airlock and onto the transport's hull. R2-D2 motors swiftly across the hull, seeking out the damage as Rick Oli tries his best to spin the ship. Rick Oli struggles to gain speed. He has a spinning, dodging, whirling ride through heavy fire.
Look!
On the view screen, a small, blue-domed R2 unit can be seen working furiously to connect a series of wires exposed by a damaged hull plate. Laser fire lands all around it. More lasers fly past the ship. R2-D2 is still busy amid the onslaught of the scimitar. The ship rocks as yet another bolt from the scimitar explodes against the hull. The Jedi frown and check the readout.
If we can't get the main power fixed, we'll be sitting ducks.
Nelith frowns and checks the readout. Anakin looks out the window.
Come on, R2!
R2-D2 continues its effort without stopping. He works steadily, reconnecting wires despite renewed shots from the fighter. Laser blasts was around the little astromech. Several shots miss by barely a hair's breadth. At last, a spray of sparks. For one horrible moment, Obi-Wan and Nelith think they have lost the droid. Then the dazzle clears from the view screen. Something changes on the cockpit display. Simultaneously, Rick Oli gives a shout of approval.
The power's back! That little droid did it!
Obi-Wan claps and cheers. Nelith closes her eyes.
Just in time.
Deflector shields up, at maximum.
Rick jams the thrusters all the way forward, and the transport rockets away from the scimitar, leaving the planet of Tatooine behind. The lone R2-D2 motors back into the airlock and disappears from view. R2-D2 pops down and trips over to the floor with a clank. Anakin and Padme help him stand.
You saved us!
Good boy.
For the next few moments, the firing is intense, but no more shots penetrate the shields.
I'm ready to make the jump.
Punch it!
Rick fits his hands to the controls and engages the hyperdrive. There is a quick, sharp whine, and the stars that fill the viewport turn from silver pinpricks to long streamers. The Nubian ship streaks smoothly into hyperspace, and the scimitar is left in the void. Maul's expressions twist. Hot rage surges through him. Impossible as it may seem, he has made an error. To have come this far, only to be met with another failure. He controls himself. There is no reason to remain on Tatooine. He knows what he must do. He must return to Coruscant and face Lord Sidious. He must send a report that the Jedi have taken off, and he is returning. He knows his master will want to hear the details in person. Maul is prepared to do this, but he does not look forward to it. He had brought him bad news once before. His successes have been spectacular, but on one mission, he has to report failure. Obi-Wan activates the subspace radio, now functional.
They won't be able to trace our transmission now. We can communicate with the Jedi Council.
Nelith makes some inputs.
Relay this. Scramble code 5 to Coruscant, care of the old folks' home.
Is it true that the entire planet of Coruscant looked like one big city?
Yeah, something like that.
Of all the places in the galaxy he wants to visit, Coruscant is at the top of his list. From what he'd heard from spice pirates and deep space pilots, it sounded like the exact opposite of Tatooine. Tatooine is a forgotten wasteland on the outer rim. Coruscant is the center of the galaxy. Tatooine is a near-empty desert. Coruscant is covered by an unending multi-leveled city. It is the capital of the Galactic Republic, and the home of the Jedi. The device beeps frantically and then stops the noise.
This is Nella Jin. Do you copy? Over.
The radio sounds a clear voice.
Is this Jedi Master Nella Jin? Over.
This is Master Jin. I will activate the holoprojector. How's the ongoing situation on Alderaan? Over.
It is going south. The Separatists have announced they have captured the Queen Breya Antilles and are planning to execute her. Over.
Everyone, especially Padme, freezes in motion upon hearing it. Nelith puts her hand on his face.
Of all times my hunch needed to be wrong.